Chapter 419. Seeing Xiao Tian's expression, the group of people from the Blue Wind Kingdom knew that Jianshan was on the side of the Kingdom of Jessen. However, their expressions did not change much. The difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. They all believed that Jianshan alone would not be able to change anything. However, the experts from the Kingdom of Jessen did not think that way. They were all overjoyed. To be able to hold the position of Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire, Xiao Tian's strength was definitely terrifying. Perhaps he could really repel the enemy's experts by himself. The sand that filled the sky with a faint layer of sword chi shot towards the group of Heaven Saint Masters from the Blue Wind Kingdom. However, the Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom had a look of disdain on their faces. They did not even put the sand in their eyes. A layer of Saint force surged out from their bodies and formed a protective barrier around them to block the sand attack. The Saint weapons in their hands continued to attack the Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Jessen. Each of their attacks was ruthless and merciless. At the same time, the countless rocks and sand that carried the sword chi landed on the Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom. In an instant, they broke through the energy barrier that they had casually set up. Due to their carelessness, the 11 Heaven Saint Masters were pierced with over 10 bloody holes. The group of Heaven Saint Masters from the Blue Wind Kingdom had a drastic change in expression. Their reactions were extremely quick. A layer of Saint force surged out from their bodies and forced out the sand that had shot into their bodies. After suffering a loss, they no longer dared to underestimate the sand that filled the sky. Now, they used all their strength to defend themselves. Only then did they manage to block the sand that filled the sky. Even so, it was extremely difficult to block the sand that filled the sky. The barrier formed by Saint Force constantly trembled as if it was in danger of being broken at any time. At this moment, a powerful pressure suddenly appeared in the sky. The sky suddenly became fiery red. The fire element within a radius of 10 kilometers rapidly gathered and floated above Xiao Tian's head. This is a heaven-tier battle skill. Quickly stop him. Don't let him use it. Heaven-ranked battle skill. He actually knows a heaven-ranked battle skill. The expressions of the 11 Heaven Saint Masters drastically changed as they stared at Xiao Tian in disbelief. However, when they thought of the power of a heaven-tier battle skill, they immediately paled and abandoned their opponents. They did not even care about the flying sand and rocks as they charged toward Xiao Tian. They were determined to kill him before he could use the heaven-tier battle skill. Looking at the 11 experts charging at him from all directions, a cruel sneer appeared on Xiao Tian's old face. He let out a low bellow, and the pressure between heaven and earth instantly grew stronger by 30%, locking everyone within. Then he suddenly swung out the huge sword in his hand. A fiery red light flashed in the air as the huge sword in Xiao Tian's hand swung out with a fiery red light, completely enveloping the 11 Heaven Saint Masters. Wherever the huge sword passed, tiny cracks appeared in the space around it. The power of this heaven-tier battle skill had almost exceeded the limits of what the space could endure, causing it to shatter. The 11 experts who were enveloped by the heaven-tier battle skill all used their strongest battle skills to resist, but the battle skills they knew were only high-level earth-tier battle skills. The difference between them and a heaven-tier battle skill was just too great. Boom! Along with a muffled explosion, it was as if a thunderclap had come from the horizon. The sound rumbled and resounded through the world, shaking people's ears to the point of buzzing. They fell into a temporary deafness, unable to hear anything at all around them. Afterward, an extremely large wave of energy swept out with an earth-shattering force, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. When the wave of energy hit the ground began to crack, forming a dense web of cracks. The ground then rapidly sank from the pressure. The heaven-tier battle skill that Xiao Tian had used was clearly of a high level. Coupled with the fact that he was a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master, the power of the battle skill had reached a shocking level. The violent shockwaves of the heaven-tier battle skill spread to a radius of over 10 kilometers. The army of the Blue Wind Kingdom that was stationed a few kilometers away was immediately destroyed by the shockwaves of the battle. Countless weak soldiers died in vain. The first-class city, defended by many soldiers of the Kingdom of Jesson, was also unable to endure such a powerful wave of energy. The towering walls that were several dozen meters tall collapsed, burying a large number of Kingdom of Jesson soldiers. The damage was also very heavy. Large swathes of buildings and houses in the city were mercilessly blown away, turning the city into a mess. Jinshin's body was also pushed back by the powerful wave of energy. He only managed to stabilize himself after being pushed back several kilometers. His vision was now completely filled with fiery red waves of energy, making it impossible for him to see what was happening inside. Jinshin immediately expanded his soul. Fortunately, his soul was not affected at all. After covering a radius of 15 kilometers, he easily captured everyone's position. At this moment, everyone's position had been shifted. They had all been pushed several kilometers away by the powerful wave of energy. Because the 11 Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom had worked together to resist the Heaven Tier battle skill, they had not directly died. They had only suffered heavy injuries, causing them to constantly vomit blood. Their faces had also become pale. Jinshin's eyes flashed with a mysterious light. Using his powerful will, he forcefully seized the surrounding waves of energy and quickly condensed them into 3 half-meter-long, finger-thick energy arrows. Using the cover of the soaring flames, the arrows shot towards the 3 Heaven Saint Masters closest to him with lightning speed. As the arrows flew, Jinshin's will followed them all the way, preventing them from being deflected by the shockwaves. The 3 Heaven Saint Masters who had been attacked by Jinshin were already heavily injured. They had not expected to be attacked in this kind of situation. Caught off guard, they had all been shot in the head by the condensed fire elemental energy arrows. With a loud explosion, their heads were blown to smithereens and their souls were destroyed. Seeing how easily he had killed 3 Heaven Saint Masters, Jinshin felt a little surprised. However, he also knew that this was the best time to launch a sneak attack. He did not dare to miss this opportunity. His hands did not stop moving. He condensed another 3 fire elemental arrows and shot them at the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters. The Heaven Saint Masters were all heavily injured, and the energy in the surroundings had yet to settle down. Coupled with the fiery red light that affected their vision, their senses were at their weakest. As a result, they were unable to guard against Jinshin's sneak attack and were all killed. In the blink of an eye, 6 Heaven Saint Masters had been killed by Jinshin's unique sneak attack. However, Jinshin was still not satisfied. With a thought, another 3 fire elemental arrows condensed in front of him before shooting off into the distance as streaks of fiery red light. At this moment, the energy in the surroundings had calmed down a lot. Jinshin's fire elemental arrows were no longer able to remain undetected. As soon as they were shot out, they were discovered by one of the Heaven Saint Masters. His face immediately changed as he cried out, "Everyone be careful!" He then immediately raised his saint weapon to block in front of him. Hearing this cry of alarm, the rest of the Heaven Saint Masters became alert. However, of the 3 Heaven Saint Masters that were attacked by Jinshin, only 2 were able to block the powerful fire elemental arrow. The weaker Heaven Saint Master, who was also heavily injured, died under the fire elemental arrow. In the blink of an eye, Jinshin took advantage of the perfect opportunity to launch a sneak attack and kill 7 Heaven Saint Masters, causing an unbearable loss to the enemy. Now, the Blue Wind Kingdom only had 4 Heaven Saint Masters left, and they had all been heavily injured by Xiao Tian's Heaven Tier battle skill. Xiao Tian's body that was floating in the air trembled. In the end, his eyes closed, and he actually fell from the sky. Using the Heaven Tier battle skill with his heavily injured body had exhausted all of his saint force. Adding on the fact that he had lost too much blood, he could not hold on any longer and fainted on the spot. Jinshin's expression changed. He no longer cared about the remaining Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom and immediately flew over to catch Xiao Tian's body. The Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom saw that only 4 of them were left, and that they were all heavily injured. Furthermore, The enemy had a mysterious young man with unfathomable strength. They did not dare to stay any longer and fled as quickly as they could, disappearing from sight in the blink of an eye. Jianshun coldly glanced at the fleeing Heaven Saint Masters and did not chase after them. He then landed on the ground with Xiao Tian's body and immediately took out a few radiant spirit pills that he had obtained during the mercenary tournament's elimination round and fed them to Xiao Tian, stabilizing his injuries. At this moment, the three Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Jessen dragged their heavily injured bodies over to Jianshun. They all curiously looked at Jianshun. Although they did not know who Jianshun was, they knew who Jianshun was from the way Xiao Tian had addressed him. To be called the Imperial Protector by the Imperial Advisor of the Qin Empire, Xiao Tian, he was definitely the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire. Among the three, only Kafir looked at Jianshun with a trace of doubt and confusion. He knew that the reason the Qin Empire had come to the aid of the Kingdom of Jessen was all because of an Imperial Protector. Since this young man was called the Imperial Protector by Xiao Tian, did that mean that the person who had truly helped the Kingdom of Jessen was actually this young man? However, when Kafir saw the unfamiliar face of the young man, he could not recall when the Kingdom of Jessen had anything to do with him. He was immediately filled with doubt. Although he had such thoughts, Kafir still opened his mouth and said, "Esteemed Imperial Protector, I represent the Kingdom of Jessen in thanking you for your assistance. May I ask if Imperial Advisor Xiao Tian's injuries are serious?" Jianshun slowly stood up and calmly looked at the blood-soaked principal of the Kargath Academy. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. A few years ago, the principal of the Kargath Academy was unreachable in his eyes. He could only look up to him with respect. But now, this unreachable figure was actually speaking to him in such a polite manner. This made Jianshun sigh inside. His injuries are indeed heavy, but his life is not in danger. Jianshun calmly said, "Imperial Protector, why don't you send Imperial Advisor Xiao Tian to the city? We will invite the best Radiant Saint Masters to treat him." Kafir continued. Jianshun nodded and said, "All right." Chapter 420. After the clash between Xiao Yan's Heaven-tier battle skill and the 11 Heaven Saint Masters, a 10-kilometer-long section of the city wall had collapsed. The damage was extremely severe, and it was certain that the wall would not be repaired without a few months' time. In this battle, although the Jessen Kingdom's 3 Heaven Saint Masters and Xiao Tian's 4 companions were heavily injured, their losses were insignificant compared to the Blue Wind Kingdom's losses. 7 Heaven Saint Masters had fallen, while the remaining 4 had all fled. They didn't stay in the Blue Wind Kingdom's camp at all. Their actions had greatly affected the Blue Wind Kingdom's army. Without the support of Heaven Saint Masters, the Blue Wind Kingdom's commander didn't dare to rashly continue the attack. Instead, he ordered the entire army to retreat 50 kilometers. Royal Grey City was a first-class city with an extremely large surface area. The distance from any of the 4 city gates to the city lord's mansion was at least 30 kilometers. In order to be able to arrive at the city walls at any time to command the battle, the Jessen Kingdom's commander had used the same method as the Western Fort. They had temporarily rented a large inn as a resting place for the soldiers closest to the city walls. In the inn, all the Radiant Saint Masters from the Eastern Fort of the Kingdom of Jessen were gathered. There were over 200 of them, and they were divided into 4 groups to treat the 4 heavily injured Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Jessen. Jianshun was also warmly received due to his status as the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire. All the generals treated Jianshun with great respect, including the commander of the Eastern Fort. After conversing with them, Jianshun gained a basic understanding of the current situation of the Eastern Fort. During this time, he also asked about the Chanyang Prefecture. However, to his disappointment, the people from the Chanyang Prefecture did not hurry to the Eastern Fort. Instead, they had gone to assist the Northern Fort. This made Jianshun's plan to see his family go down the drain. At this moment, Jianshun's expression suddenly became serious. He sternly said, "General Liu, may I ask how many Heaven Saint Masters the Blue Wind Kingdom has?" "There are actually 11 of them attacking the Eastern Fort. Has the Blue Wind Kingdom sent out all of their Heaven Saint Masters? General Liu was the commander of the Eastern Fort. Hearing this, General Liu gently sighed. A trace of worry appeared on his old face. He said, Imperial Protector, you may not know this, but 5 of the 11 Saint Masters you saw were from the Qingan Kingdom. The Qingan Kingdom, Jianshan softly murmured. A sharp light flashed through his eyes. He continued to ask, could it be that the Qingan Kingdom also interfered in this battle? General Liu looked at Jianshan and then slightly lowered his head in thought. He said, perhaps, although the Qingan Kingdom did not send out an army, but of the 11 Heaven Saint Masters you saw today, 5 of them were indeed from the Qingan Kingdom. Hearing this, Jianshan temporarily fell silent. He lowered his head and did not say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. A sharp light flashed through his eyes from time to time. General Liu, first tell me how many Saint Masters the Blue Wind Kingdom and the Qingan Kingdom have in total. Which family did those who died belong to? Jianshan asked without raising his head. His tone was very calm. General Liu thought for a moment and said, Imperial Protector, through our appraisal of their bodies and clothing, of the 7 Heaven Saint Masters who died in battle, 3 of them were from the Qingan Kingdom. The remaining 4 were from the Blue Wind Kingdom. The Blue Wind Kingdom had a total of 8 Heaven Saint Masters, and half of them were left. The Qingan Kingdom also had a total of 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Excluding the 3 who died, there were 5 left. Jianshan slightly nodded. He lowered his head in thought and said, You do not need to worry about those Heaven Saint Masters. I will deal with them. General Liu, if there is nothing else, you should leave first. General Liu did not show any displeasure on his face. He immediately stood up from his chair and respectfully clasped his hands to Jianshan. He said, Yes, Imperial Protector. If Imperial Protector needs anything, you can call me at any time. Afterward, General Liu walked towards the door. Bang! Just as General Liu walked to the door, it was suddenly knocked open by a strong force. It was immediately smashed into pieces. Then a white shadow flashed from outside and quickly rushed into Jianshan's arms. Jianshan was slightly stunned. Then a rare smile appeared on his face. He reached out and hugged the white shadow. He reached out and gently stroked its small head. The white shadow that suddenly came in was the white tiger that Jianshan had forgotten to take with him when he was at the border of the Qingan Kingdom. Seeing that it was the familiar little white tiger that had suddenly barged in, the anger that had just appeared on General Liu's face immediately dissipated. This little white tiger was brought here by Xiao Tian, so General Liu was not unfamiliar with it. Sir Imperial Protector, the door has been damaged. I will immediately send someone to repair it. After saying this, General Liu slowly retreated. Whoa! The white tiger stared at Jianshan with teary eyes. Its eyes were full of grievances. Its front paws kept scratching Jianshan's chest. Those sharp claws tore the clothes on Jianshan's chest into shreds to express its dissatisfaction. Jianshan's right hand gently stroked the white tiger's small furry head. He kept saying some apologetic words to appease the white tiger's emotions. Then he took out a 1,000-year-old ginseng from his space ring and placed it in front of the white tiger. The white tiger was immediately stunned. Then its eyes immediately lit up, as if it had completely forgotten the displeasure in its heart. It wolfed down the 1,000-year-old ginseng, then opened its mouth wide. After yawning, it closed its eyes and lay in Jianshan's arms, snoring loudly. Seeing the white tiger's cute appearance, Jianshan couldn't help but reveal a faint smile on his face. He suddenly realized that he seemed to have deep feelings for the white tiger, and the white tiger was also very dependent on him. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. During these 3 days, Jianshan fed the white tiger a few heavenly treasures, hoping that the white tiger could quickly grow. This was because he kept Uncle Xiu's words in mind. He must increase the strength of the white tiger as soon as possible. Jianshan believed that Uncle Xiu wouldn't be so presumptuous. Perhaps in the near future, the white tiger really would encounter great trouble. 3 days later, Xiao Tian and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Jessan had completely recovered from their injuries. They immediately went to see Jianshan, and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Jessan naturally couldn't help but expressed their gratitude. Imperial Protector, it's fortunate that you came in time. Otherwise, I would have lost my old life here. Xiao Tian said with a faint smile, but there was no trace of fear on his face. Xiao Tian, in that situation, even if you couldn't defeat them, I believe that you had the ability to escape. Jianshan chuckled. To be able to hold the position of Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire, all of them were the cream of the crop. They were on a completely different level from the Imperial Protectors of ordinary kingdoms. Unless the difference in strength between the two sides was too great, they wouldn't die so easily. At the same time, Jianshan held Xiao Tian in high regard. Xiao Tian had reached the 5th cycle of Heaven Saint Master in a little over 100 years of age, so his talent was extremely terrifying. It was very likely that he would break through to Saint Ruler in the future. Jianshan would never believe that Xiao Tian didn't have any life-saving trump cards on him. The Qin Empire wouldn't let such a talented expert die so easily. After exchanging some pleasantries, Jianshan got to the point. He said seriously, "Now that the Kingdom of Jessin has interfered in the matter of attacking the Kingdom of Jessin, there will still be 9 Heaven Saint Masters left if they work together. They will still pose a great threat to the Kingdom of Jessin. Xiao Tian, guard the Eastern Fort for the next few days and prevent any sudden attacks from their experts." Imperial Protector, are you going to leave? Xiao Tian was surprised and asked with some uncertainty. Jianshan nodded. I will personally pay a visit to the Kingdom of Jessin. They have interfered twice in this matter, so I can't let them off so easily. Killing intent flashed through Jianshan's eyes when he reached there. If he hadn't been present the first time, Changbo probably would have been in danger. Chapter 421. Hearing that Jianshan wanted to go to the Qiangan Kingdom alone, the 3 experts from the Kingdom of Jessin were surprised. They could not understand why the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire would hate the Qiangan Kingdom so much. Although the Qiangan Kingdom had sent experts to interfere, this alone was not enough for Jianshan to go to the Qiangan Kingdom. Although they were puzzled, they did not dare to ask because of their status. They could only keep it to themselves. Imperial Protector, let Xiao Tian go with you, Xiao Tian said. Jianshan was not a Saint Ruler yet, so he was afraid that Jianshan would be in danger. Jianshan shook his head and said, No, I can go alone. Xiao Tian, you stay here for the next few days to prevent another attack from the Blue Wind Kingdom. Xiao Tian showed a helpless expression and said, All right, Imperial Protector, you must be careful. Although the Qiangan Kingdom has lost a few experts, they still have many experts. Afterward, Jianshan left the royal Gray City alone. He flew 1,000 meters in the air and hurried to the Qiangan Kingdom. He held a tiger the size of a cat in his arms. Jianshan did not plan on bringing the white tiger with him, but the white tiger kept clinging to him before he left, so he had no choice but to take it with him. He was very confident in his current strength. He believed that he could protect the white tiger in front of several Heaven Saint Masters. In the blink of an eye, the sky darkened. In a Grade 2 city in the Qiangan Kingdom, the number of people on the streets decreased rapidly. The bustling city gradually quieted down. At the city gate, a man who looked like a general looked at the sky and said to the people below, It's time to close the city gate. Immediately, a dozen or so soldiers ran out and pushed the heavy city gate shut slowly. Wait! At this moment, a voice rang out from outside the city. Following that, a white figure flashed. Just when the city gates were about to close, a young man with a small magical beast in his arms had already flashed into the city and left. The soldiers did not stop the young man from entering. They guarded the gates all day long and had seen many different people. They had already trained a pair of discerning eyes. From the speed at which the young man entered, they could see that he was very strong. He was at least a great Saint Master. The young man was Jianshan. It was already late, and Jianshan did not want to cause trouble in the royal palace of the Qiangan Kingdom in the middle of the night. As a result, he planned to rest for the night and continue his journey the next morning. Jianshan carried the cute white tiger in his arms as he walked on the deserted streets. He entered several inns, but they were all full rooms. There were no extra rooms. At this moment, Jianshan entered a smaller inn and asked, Boss, do you have any extra rooms? Yes, yes, yes. How many rooms do you want? Immediately, a young man in his 20s walked out and said with a smile on his face. Seeing the young man's face, Jinshin was stunned. A person's face appeared in the depths of his mind, but he quickly recovered and said, "Give me the best in. Also, give me a plate of barbecued beef." While speaking, Jinshin flipped his hand and a gold coin appeared in his hand. He extended his hand and handed it to the young man. The young man immediately received the gold coin Jinshin threw over and said with a smile, "Sir, please take a seat. I'll bring you the dishes right away." While speaking, the young man walked away. Jinshin stared blankly at the young man's departing figure. He gradually sank into deep thought. He casually walked to a clean table and sat down. Uncle Kendall's face appeared in his mind. For a moment, he was immersed in his memories. "Sir, the dishes you ordered are here." But after a while, a voice woke Jinshin up from his thoughts. He saw that the waiter had already placed a large plate of barbecued beef in front of Jinshin's table. It was the young man who had just left. Woo-woo. The white tiger let out a happy cry. It jumped on the table and began to gobble up the food without holding back. Looking at the white tiger's appearance, Jinshin couldn't help but show a trace of a bitter smile on his face. He said, "Give me another plate of barbecued beef." "Okay, sir." The young man straightforwardly agreed and then left. Jinshin sized up this inn. This inn wasn't big. There were a total of 20 or so old wooden tables. They were wiped clean and shiny. A middle-aged woman who seemed to be the shopkeeper was sitting in front of the counter, calculating on an abacus. The sound of the abacus moving was endless. In the entire inn, there seemed to be no one else other than this young man and a waiter. At this moment, a few burly men with bare upper bodies walked in from outside. One of them immediately shouted, "Madam, this month's deadline is up. Hurry up and pay the fees that you should pay." Hearing this, the middle-aged woman who was calculating on an abacus in front of the counter raised her head and looked at the few men. Her eyes showed a trace of embarrassment. After nagging for a while, she took out a handful of silver coins from under the counter and said, "Gentlemen, the sound of this little shop is not good this month. We can only barely make a living. We don't even have the fees to hire a waiter, so we can only take out this much." "How much is this? 135 silver coins? Do you think we are beggars? I don't care how your business is. In short, 3 gold coins a month, not one less." A burly man shouted fiercely, as if he was going to start fighting at the slightest disagreement. The madam was forced to helplessly take out another handful of silver coins with a bitter face. Her face was full of unwillingness. The total amount was exactly 300 silver coins. The few burly men counted the amount of silver coins. After confirming that there was no mistake, they left here. Just as they left, the young man came out with a plate of barbecued beef and said, "Mother, did they come to collect the fees again?" "Yes," the middle-aged woman said with a sad sigh. She looked weak and her face was full of worry. "Mother, we can't go on like this. We can't make much money a month. Once we pay the fees, we won't have much left," the young man said with an indignant face. The middle-aged woman sighed and said, "This can't be helped. Who told us to have no support behind us? It's the same no matter where we go." Hearing this, the young man lowered his head with a helpless face. "Shopkeeper, what kind of fees do they charge? Does everyone who opens a shop have to pay a fee?" Jianshun, who was sitting not far away, suddenly asked. The young man held a towel in his hand and carefully wiped the table. He said without raising his head, "Of course it is the protection fee and the site fee. 3 gold coins a month, not one less. Our little shop only makes a total of 12 gold coins a month. After deducting the 5 gold coins that the city lord's mansion has to pay, we don't have much left. We can barely make a living. Does every shop have to pay such a fee?" Jianshun continued to ask. The young man shook his head and said, "The city lord mansion's tax is something that every shop has to pay. However, the people behind us are all members of the mercenary group. Relying on their power in the city, they began to pick on those small shops that don't have a backer and charge them recklessly." Jianshun fell silent. He knew in his heart that this kind of thing happened everywhere. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, those without strength would only be bullied. This was the unspoken rule of almost every world. "Madam, are there any empty rooms?" At this moment, a voice came from outside. A few young men in white robes walked in from outside. Seeing the guests come in, the inn's waiter hurriedly went up and said with a smile, "Yes, yes, of course there are rooms. How many rooms do you need?" The young men looked around the inn arrogantly. They frowned slightly and said with some dissatisfaction, "This inn is too shabby. Will the young master be able to get used to it? We came too late. The other inns are all full." "We'll have to put up with it first," said a young man beside them. "That's the only way. Shopkeeper, we'll take all the rooms in this inn. Drive out all the irrelevant people." One of the young men said arrogantly. Hearing this, the waiter and the middle-aged woman sitting behind the counter looked embarrassed. The middle-aged woman said, "Sir, we still have a lot of rooms left in the inn. It should be enough for you to rest." "Cut the crap. Do what you're told. Are you afraid that our Yangji Zong won't pay?" The young man in white robes said arrogantly. When they heard that it was Yangji Zong, the middle-aged woman and the waiter's expression changed. They had no choice but to go upstairs and ask all the guests who had already stayed in the inn to come down. For a time, there was a burst of noisy cursing from time to time on the second floor of the inn. "Damn it, what kind of business is this? I've already paid to stay here. Why are you suddenly asking me to leave? Do you not want to continue operating? I'm a member of the Bloodthorn mercenary group." On the second floor of the inn, a deep voice came down, but in the next moment, the voice suddenly changed and exclaimed, "What? Yangji Zong's people? Forget it. Just pretend I didn't say anything." Then a big man with a bear-like waist and a tiger's back quickly came down from the second floor. Next, people came down from the second floor one after another. Although there were many people with bad tempers, as soon as they heard the name Yangji Zong, they immediately shrank their necks and obediently left without saying a word. Their faces were full of fear. Soon, the guests in the inn had been cleared out. Only one person and one beast were still leisurely eating barbecued beef on the first floor of the inn, seemingly indifferent to everything around them. Chapter 422. The waiter returned the gold coin to Jianshin and said apologetically, "Sir, I'm really sorry. You'll have to move to another inn. These 2 plates of barbecue beef are free of charge. Please forgive us." Jianshin glanced at the gold coin returned by the waiter and did not take it back. He then turned to look at the young men who called themselves Yangji Zong and said, "How much money do you plan to pay for this inn?" Hearing this, the gazes of the youths from the Yangji sect immediately gathered on Jianshin. A cold light flickered in their eyes, and their gazes were sharp. If a timid person were to be stared at like this, they would have been scared to the point of cowardice. "Who are you, boy?" one of the young men of Yangji Zong asked. His face was very ugly. They could hear a hint of provocation in Jianshin's words. The other young men of Yangji Zong also stared at Jianshin with cold faces. They kept wondering which big force Jianshin was from. Yangji Zong was very famous in the Qiangan Kingdom. Almost everyone in the Qiangan Kingdom knew about him. Looking at the whole kingdom, there were only a few people who could challenge Yangji Zong. They were all worried that Jianshin was from some big force. Jianshin sneered and said, "You are not qualified to know my identity. You haven't answered my question yet. How much money do you plan to pay for this inn?" Although Jianshin's tone was very flat, anyone could hear the arrogance in his words. He did not take Yangji Zong seriously at all. The innkeeper and the waiter of the inn both looked embarrassed. They knew that if the 2 sides continued like this, Yangji Zong would definitely not let it go. Once a fight broke out, they're small and would not be able to withstand it. The waiter and the innkeeper of the inn wanted to go forward and persuade Jianshin. But looking at Jianshin's young face and extraordinary temperament, they stopped the idea in their hearts. As the owners of an inn, they'd seen many people of all shapes and sizes in a day, and this allowed them to develop a certain level of insight. They knew in their hearts that the identity of that young man was definitely not so simple, and if they rashly went forward to persuade him, not only would it not be of any use, it would instead cause trouble for themselves. The young men of Yangji Zong were all very proud. Relying on their powerful background, they did not fear anyone. Jianshin's contemptuous attitude immediately angered them. One of the young men took out a purple coin from his space belt and said arrogantly, I'll pay 1 purple coin to reserve this inn. Do you have any objections? 1 purple gold coin was equivalent to 100 gold coins. This was almost half a year's worth of income for this inn. Using 1 purple gold coin to reserve this inn was indeed worth 1,000 gold coins. The innkeeper and the waiter of the inn were also shocked by the generosity of Yangjizong's people. The mother and son looked at each other, somewhat moved. Jianshun sat at the table and leisurely ate his roasted beef. With a flip of his hand, he took out a handful of purple coins shining with a purple light from his space ring and threw them on the table. I'll pay 10 purple coins to reserve this inn. Please leave. Jianshun was not a person who liked to show off, but the actions of these people in front of him made him feel very uncomfortable, which was why he made such an unusual move. Seeing Jianshun take out 10 purple coins, the young men of Yangjizong became angry. Becoming fierce, they began to shout one after another. Brat, are you deliberately going against our Yangjizong? Do you want to die? If you know what's good for you, get the hell out of here. Otherwise, even if you have money, we'll make sure you don't have a life to enjoy it. If you don't want to die, get the hell out of here. Even if you're a prince, you can't bear the consequences of offending Yangjizong. The young men began to clamor and slowly surrounded Jianshun, surrounding Jianshun in the middle. Jianshun didn't even look at them. His head was still lowered as he ate the roasted beef on the table. If you can't afford it, please leave. I've already reserved this inn. You're not welcome here. You're courting death. The young men flew into a rage. Immediately, 2 of them brandished their fists towards Jianshun's head. A trace of disdain appeared in Jianshun's eyes. With a flash of light, 2 chopsticks immediately flew out of the chopstick box on the table and shot towards the 2 men. With 2 miserable screams, the 2 men's fists were directly pierced by the chopsticks. Jianshun's fists were directly pierced by the chopsticks, making it so that they couldn't open their palms. The 2 men grimaced in pain. Jianshun's move immediately shocked the other young men who wanted to attack. Their eyes were filled with deep fear. How dare you attack Yangjizong's people? Are you tired of living? Do you want to die? One of the young men shouted with a pale face. A cold light flashed in Jianshun's eyes. With a wave of his hand, the 2 chopsticks in his hand flew out at the same time. They turned into 2 sharp swords and pierced the throat of the man who spoke, killing him on the spot. Jianshun's move frightened the young men. One of them said in a trembling voice, "How dare you kill Yangjizong's people? If you want to live, get out of here right now. Otherwise, I don't mind killing a few more people," Jianshun said calmly. His voice was a little cold, making the young men feel cold all over. Hearing this, the few young men who were scared to the point their guts were about to split open looked at each other, and then they left without saying a word. "Stop! Carry this man out." Jianshun stopped them and pointed at the young man on the ground. The Yangjizong's men didn't dare to disobey. They immediately returned and carried the body of their companion out of the inn. As the Yangjizong's men left, the inn suddenly fell into a dead silence. The innkeeper and the waiter looked at Jianshun timidly, not knowing what to do next. Jianshun threw down the chopsticks in his hand and said, "Innkeeper, I have booked this inn. These 10 purple coins are the fee." After saying this, Jianshun didn't wait for the innkeeper to reply. He carried the white tiger, who had finished eating the roast beef, and went upstairs. Now that the sky had darkened, a carriage was slowly making its way down the deserted streets of the second-class city. More than a dozen guards on magic beast mounts walked on both sides of the road, tightly protecting the carriage. With such a lineup, one could tell with a single glance that the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. At this time, several young men ran from the front and finally came to the front of the carriage. They were Yangjizong's men who had just been chased out by Jianshun. One of them was carrying the body of his companion on his back. "Young master, you have to give us justice." Someone dared to challenge the authority of Yangjizong. Not only did he not put our Yangjizong in his eyes, but he also killed Little Four. "Young master, Little Four was killed. This matter must be brought to justice. Otherwise, where is the authority of our Yangjizong?" As soon as the young men got close to the carriage, they began to loudly wail, their faces full of anger. What happened? Tell us in detail. A middle-aged man riding atop a demonic beast shouted at the group of cultivators. Then, the young men told the story of what had happened in the inn with exaggerated details, completely pushing Jianshan to the opposite side of Yangji's zone. After hearing those words, the dozen or so guards on the magic beast mounts were enraged, and their eyes were filled with killing intent. Young master, this person is too arrogant. We must teach him a good lesson and let him know the consequences of offending our Yangji zone, said one of the guards on his mount. Yes, young master, we must teach that person a good lesson. How dare he not put our Yangji zone in his eyes? Does he really think our Yangji zone is easy to bully? He actually dared to kill our Yangji zone's disciple. If we don't get an explanation for this matter, then our Yangji zone won't have any face to stand in the Qiangan kingdom. Many of the guards began to speak righteously, their faces full of anger. Everyone, calm down. From what you've said, that mysterious young man is definitely very powerful. He's an Earth Saint Master at the very least, so we can't go recklessly. Third Martial Uncle just happens to be coming to pick us up tomorrow. Once he comes, our strength will increase by a lot. It won't be too late for us to seek justice then. A steady middle-aged man stopped the impulsive crowd. The middle-aged man clearly had a lot of prestige in the group. As soon as he spoke, the others immediately shut up. A voice rang out from the carriage. Uncle Zhou, we'll do as you say. That person can actually kill people with chopsticks, so he's definitely very strong. Even if we can catch him rashly, the casualties will definitely be great. The gains won't make up for the losses. Let's wait for Third Martial Uncle to come tomorrow before looking for him. Yes, young master. The guards all responded in unison. The next morning, Jianshan didn't stay for too long. He left the inn early in the morning and continued on his way to the Qiangan Kingdom's imperial palace. When the mother and son of the inn saw Jianshan leave after paying 10 purple coins, they were so happy that they couldn't close their mouths for a long time. However, their happiness didn't last long before a large group of people aggressively barged into the inn. Chapter 423. Jianshan had already left the inn. He was currently flying through the air, hurrying toward the imperial palace of the Qiangan Kingdom. He had no idea that his actions in the inn had already caused a lot of trouble for the innkeeper and her son. 2 hours later, Jianshan finally arrived above the imperial palace. He hovered 500 meters in the air as he coldly stared down at the majestic halls below. The Qiangan Kingdom had once enjoyed a glorious period of time. It was extremely powerful. Although it was nowhere near as powerful as the 8 great kingdoms of the Tianyuan continent, it was still an existence that reigned supreme in the region. It possessed a great status and had the longest history among the surrounding kingdoms. It had existed for several thousand years, far longer than the Kingdom of Jessin, which had only existed for a few hundred years. However, the Qiangan Kingdom suffered a great calamity afterwards, almost being destroyed. Although they managed to survive, they had lost a great deal of territory and their strength had declined. They had never recovered since then, becoming a small, nameless kingdom. As a result, the imperial palace of the Qiangan Kingdom was extremely majestic. Although it could not be compared to the Qin Empire, it was still the most luxurious and majestic among the kingdoms in the region. Jianshan hovered in the air as he stared down at the halls below. In the end, his gaze locked onto the largest hall in the center. He slowly opened his right hand, and suddenly, the fire-attributed energy in the surroundings began to surge violently, gathering toward Jianshan as visible streaks of fire-red light. They quickly condensed into a 20-meter-long sword of fire. The surging waves of heat seemed to set the surrounding space ablaze, causing the surrounding space to become faintly red. The temperature of the surroundings rapidly rose as well. There's someone in the air. It's a peak heaven Saint Master. Oh no, he wants to attack the Imperial Palace. Go get the Imperial Protector. Go get the Imperial Protector to deal with him immediately. The numerous elite soldiers patrolling the palace noticed the abnormality in the air and their expressions changed drastically. Cries of alarm rang out incessantly. The numerous elite soldiers in the palace were in an uproar. Jianshan gently waved his right hand, and the sword of fire turned into a red streak of light. It shot toward the largest hall with lightning-like speed. Boom! Following a violent explosion, the flames engulfed the huge palace. The intense heat that was enough to melt steel directly melted a large part of the palace. Rolling heat waves spread out with the palace as the center, forcing the elite soldiers guarding the palace to continuously retreat, not daring to approach the palace at all. Dong! 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 Asterisk dong! Asterisk the dull sound of the bell echoed throughout the entire palace. This was the highest summons of the Qiangan kingdom. It had not been rung for a long time. The quiet imperial palace immediately became lively. A large number of elite soldiers surged out of the various halls like a flood. They moved extremely quickly, but when they saw the figure in the air, they were all stunned. A Heaven Saint Master was not someone they could deal with. Jianshun controlled the energy of the world with a thought and condensed it into a sword of fire again. He shot it toward the largest hall in an attempt to completely destroy it. At this moment, a powerful sword chi shot over from afar. It moved as fast as lightning, shattering Jianshun's sword of fire. The explosion caused waves of fire to cover the sky, dyeing it red. A few scattered sparks shot toward various parts of the imperial palace, leaving behind a meter-wide hole wherever they hit. A white-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion flew over from afar. He hovered 500 meters in the air and stared at Jianshun from 100 meters away. His face was filled with anger. "Sir, who are you? Why have you destroyed the imperial palace of my Qiangan kingdom?" The old man glared at Jianshun and asked with a deep voice, "I'm from the kingdom of Jesson. I've come to exterminate you." Jianshun replied emotionlessly. The old man was taken aback. He said, "What did you say? You're from the kingdom of Jesson? That's impossible. We know exactly how many experts there are in the kingdom of Jesson. There's definitely no one like you. Who are you? There's no need to make up an excuse to fool me." Jianshun sneered. He ignored the old man and looked into the depths of the imperial palace. He called out, "Qianyun, get out here and accept your death." Jianshun's voice was thunderous, echoing through the surroundings. The same response was constantly repeated. Everyone in the imperial palace was alarmed. Their expressions changed drastically. Qianyun was a member of the imperial family of the Qiangan kingdom. He was an ancestor of the king. He had an extremely high status. No one had ever dared to call him by his real name. In the depths of the imperial palace, in a luxurious hall, a white-robed old man with a transcendent air was sitting cross-legged on a bed. However, his left sleeve was empty, and there was no arm there at all. This was an old man with a broken arm. In front of him, 3 middle-aged men stood respectfully. At this moment, all of them had angry expressions on their faces. "Sigh." The old man sitting cross-legged on the bedside and muttered, "He still came in the end. It's all because of the Heaven tier battle skill. If I hadn't interfered in this matter because of my greed, I'm afraid this matter could have been completely avoided." "Teacher, is that person outside from the kingdom of Jesson? Is he the one who severed your left arm?" One of the middle-aged men gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with hatred and anger. Right now, the kingdom of Jesson is facing the attack of the Four-Nation Alliance. Instead of defending against the Four-Nation Alliance, their experts have come to our Qiangan kingdom to cause trouble. This is ridiculous. Does he really think that our Qiangan kingdom has no experts? "Teacher, we must avenge our severed arm. We must tear that person to pieces to vent our anger." The 3 middle-aged men spoke righteously one by one. Their expressions were extremely agitated. The old man sighed and said, "Don't mention this matter again. That person is very strong. Back then, I joined forces with 4 experts from the Pingyang kingdom, but we couldn't hurt him at all. Instead, we were seriously injured by him. Our Qiangan kingdom is no longer as strong as it used to be. We can't afford to provoke such a powerful enemy. You 3 stay here. Teacher will be back soon." As soon as his voice fell, the old man, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, turned into a white afterimage and disappeared in the blink of an eye. How is this possible? Even with Teacher's strength and 4 experts working together, we couldn't harm him at all. Even if he's a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, he shouldn't be able to do this. The three middle-aged men were stunned by the old man's words. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Outside, Qian Yun, who was missing an arm, had already arrived in front of Jianshan. He stood side by side with the other Heaven Saint Master from the Qiangan Kingdom. Jianshan stared at Qian Yun coldly. Qian Yun, I thought you wouldn't dare to come out. That day, I said that I would let you witness the destruction of the Qiangan Kingdom with your own eyes. Jianshan's words caused the two old men's expressions to change. The old man beside Qian Yun was filled with killing intent as he yelled, Sir, do you think you're Saint Ruler? How dare you boast like that? Be careful not to cut your tongue. Qian Yun pulled the old man back and stopped him from speaking. He then said to Jianshan, Sir, I've already said that my actions have nothing to do with the Qiangan Kingdom. If you have any problems, you can come at me. Don't involve others. Once the Qiangan Kingdom is involved in this war, I'm afraid it won't be a good situation for the Kingdom of Jessan. Jianshan sneered, Humph. What a good excuse of having nothing to do with the Qiangan Kingdom. You're lying with your eyes wide open. Then what about the experts from your Qiangan Kingdom joining forces with the Blue Wind Kingdom to attack the Jessan Kingdom's eastern fort? Could it be that those experts weren't from your Qiangan Kingdom? That's impossible. Qian Yun's expression turned serious. He was about to quibble, but before he could say anything, the old man beside him pulled on his clothes and whispered, Your left arm was cut off. In order to avenge you, His Majesty contacted a few forces in the Kingdom of Jessan and asked them to personally attack the Kingdom of Jessan. What? That actually happened? Qian Yun's expression froze. Clearly, he didn't know that the Qiangan Kingdom had already sent experts to attack the Jessan Kingdom. However, his expression immediately turned angry as he shouted in a deep voice, Nonsense! This is simply nonsense! Why didn't you discuss such a big matter with me beforehand? The old man beside Qian Yun sighed and said, Although we sent experts to assist the Blue Wind Kingdom in attacking the Kingdom of Jessan, the result was very unsatisfactory. 3 of our experts died, and we didn't even bring back their corpses. The remaining 2 were also heavily injured. Hearing this, Qian Yun's expression became very ugly. This kind of loss was unbearable for the Qiangan Kingdom because every single Heaven Saint Master was a pillar of support for the kingdom. This was directly related to the status of the kingdom. Now you have nothing to say, right? You just want me to destroy the palace of your Qiangan Kingdom. Jianshan sneered. His eyes flashed with a strong, killing intent. With a thought, the energy in a 15-kilometer radius suddenly became violent. The fire elemental energy quickly gathered around Jianshan and formed 3 fire elemental swords. They seemed to be able to burn the air as they shot towards the palace below. Stop! The 2 Heaven Saint Masters on the other side yelled out and struck out at the same time. They sent out 3 sword chi to block Jianshan's fire elemental swords. With a boom, the fire elemental swords condensed from the energy of the world immediately exploded. They turned into waves of fire that swept through the surroundings and dyed the sky red. Sir, this is a misunderstanding. Our Qiangan Kingdom will definitely not interfere with your battle. Please show mercy, Qian Yun said. He knew that Jianshan was very powerful. In order to protect the Qiangan Kingdom from being attacked, he had no choice but to lower his voice and beg for mercy. Don't even think about it. Jianshan sneered. If it weren't for his strength, he probably would have been killed long ago. How could he be so easy to talk to? Since you've interfered, I'll kill you first. Jianshan growled. The origin energy of the sword spirits shot out from his right hand and condensed into a 1-meter-long sword chi that did not disperse. It then quickly shot towards the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. Chapter 424. Hearing Qian Yun's warning, the old man nodded and a 1-meter-long saber appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, he sent out a powerful saber chi towards Jianshan. At the same time, a long sword appeared in Qian Yun's hand, and he charged towards Jianshan. Jianshan used the origin energy of the sword spirits to disperse the incoming saber chi. He then withstood the powerful shock waves and continued to charge toward the other 2 without slowing down in the slightest. With a wave of his right arm, The origin energy of the sword spirits left behind a beautiful purple and green light in the air as it stabbed towards the two experts from the Qingan Kingdom. Because of Qian Yun's warning, the other old man from the Qingan Kingdom didn't dare to clash with Jinshin's origin energy. He immediately pulled back his saber and quickly retreated. At the same time, he continuously slashed down with his saber, shooting out saber chi after saber chi towards Jinshin. Jinshin used the origin energy of the sword spirits to shatter all the saber chi shot out by the old man. A vast wave of energy shook the sky, forming an energy storm that wreaked havoc in the world. It blew the sand and stones off the ground, filling the sky with dust. Many of the elite soldiers in the Imperial Palace felt unsteady as their bodies were blown around by the energy storm. Sword chi of the heavens. Suddenly, Qian Yun yelled out. The long sword in his hand suddenly erupted with a powerful energy wave. A meter-long pure sword chi with a blinding light tore through the sky and shot towards Jinshin with lightning speed. Just as the sword chi shot out, a pressure that seemed to come from the heavens and earth locked onto Jinshin. The sword chi shot out by Qian Yun was actually an earth tier battle skill. Jinshin quickly moved and dodged the sword chi shot out by Qian Yun. However, he was already locked onto by the sword chi and couldn't dodge at all. The only thing he could do was to destroy it. A fierce light flashed in Jinshin's eyes. With a thought, the fire elemental power between heaven and earth suddenly gathered crazily, quickly condensing into 3 fire elemental swords. It seemed that the flames could burn the air, causing the temperature between heaven and earth to rise rapidly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Following 3 air-piercing sounds, the 3 fire elemental swords turned into red light and shot towards Qian Yun's sword chi. Boom! When the two collided, there was a violent explosion. The surging energy was like a stormy sea that swept out in all directions. The exploding flames turned the sky red, and the scene was spectacular. The waves of fire that filled the sky affected the Imperial Palace below. Many of the palaces were destroyed, and a large number of elite soldiers were drowned by the waves of fire and burned to death. The palace was in a state of chaos. Even the well-trained elite soldiers began to frantically flee for their lives. One after another, they sought shelter from the shockwaves to avoid losing their lives in vain. Jinshin's body was wrapped in a thick layer of wind elemental saint force. The origin energy of the sword spirits in his hand emitted a dazzling light, and then quickly rushed towards Qian Yun. Qian Yun stared at Jinshin with a serious face. His eyes glanced at the severely damaged palace below, and then immediately flew out of the city. He wanted to lure Jinshin outside for a duel. Jinshin's eyes flashed with purple and green light. At this moment, his eyes turned into a strange purple and green color. His left eye was green, and his right eye was purple. It was very demonic, like a pair of ghost eyes. Just looking at it would make one's hair stand on end. Suddenly, countless rocks floated up from below, emitting a faint purple and green sword chi. They shot towards Qian Yun as fast as lightning. Qian Yun had already experienced the power of Jinshin's move when he was outside the fortress of the Pingyang Kingdom. He no longer dared to underestimate it. Surging saint force immediately surged out of his body, forming a powerful barrier around him to block the attacks of the rocks. The rocks with the purple and green sword chi flew at an extremely fast speed and soon caught up with Qian Yun. Then, with a powerful force, they continuously bombarded Qian Yun's body, causing the saint force barrier around his body to shake violently. Because of this, Qian Yun's speed was also slowed down. Jinshin's origin energy of the sword spirits turned into a faint blue light and chased after the rocks. Wherever he passed, the surrounding rocks would open up a path. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Qian Yun. Waving the origin energy of the sword spirits, he mercilessly stabbed towards the center of Qian Yun's forehead. Qian Yun's body was surrounded by rocks, and there was no way to dodge. Helplessly, he could only brace himself and use his saint weapon to block Jinshin's attack. Ding! With a soft sound, a 2-finger-wide gap appeared on Qian Yun's saint weapon. The damage to the saint weapon caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned pale. Jinshin's first sword strike was followed by the second. The sword spirits turned into a beautiful light and continued to stab towards Qianyun's forehead at an extremely fast speed. Qianyun's face immediately changed. Without caring about anything else, he once again used his saint weapon to block in front of him, and at the same time, he rapidly retreated. The origin energy of the sword spirits clashed with Qianyun's saint weapon. Another gap appeared on Qianyun's saint weapon, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The consecutive injuries made it difficult for him to maintain his saint force barrier to block the surrounding rocks. In an instant, his body was pierced into a hornet's nest, and fresh blood dyed his entire body red. The intense pain caused Qianyun to let out a blood-curdling scream, and his body directly fell from the sky. Qianyun, the other expert, paled in fright. He immediately flew over and borrowed Qianyun's body. Jinshin coldly snorted, and a strong killing intent flashed through his eyes. With a point of his finger, the floating rocks immediately changed directions and shot towards the old man like moths to a flame. The old man roared out, and his surging saint force instantly formed a powerful barrier around him, blocking the attacks of the rocks. Jinshin grabbed at the air with his left hand, and another fire elemental sword quickly condensed. Burning with flames, it turned into a red streak of light and shot towards the barrier formed by the old man's body. Boom! With a violent explosion, the old man holding Qianyun immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly became pale, and his body had already fallen to the ground. Jinshin rapidly descended from the sky. Wielding the origin energy of the sword spirits, he charged towards the two of them. His eyes were cold, and a strong killing intent flickered through them. Clearly, he did not plan on letting the two of them go. Seeing Jinshin close in, the old man holding Qianyun's face changed drastically. After this clash, he understood just how powerful Jinshin was. He was not someone he could stop. This is the result of your Qianyun kingdom interfering in the war. Today, I will destroy the imperial palace of your Qianyun kingdom. Your Qianyun kingdom will only exist in name, Jinshin coldly said. Stop! Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. A large group of people quickly rushed over from the distance. Looking at the clothes they were wearing, every one of them was a person of high status. The leading middle-aged man wore a golden dragon robe that was very eye-catching. A group of people came before the two heavily injured experts. Their expressions became very serious. The middle-aged man in the dragon robe immediately squatted down to support Qianyun. He said with concern, "Imperial Ancestor, are you okay?" Qianyun laid on the ground powerlessly. He stared at the sky blankly and let out a long sigh. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. If I hadn't coveted Chong Wuji's heaven-tier battle skill back then, none of this would have happened. Imperial Ancestor, don't say that. If you want to blame it on someone, it's just that our Qianyun kingdom is too weak. The middle-aged man became gloomy. He then looked at Jinshin and said, Senior, I know you've come for the kingdom of Jesson. This king will now issue a decree that I will not interfere with the matters of the kingdom of Jesson. Please show mercy and spare the imperial ancestor. Jinshin sneered, It's useless no matter what you say. Today, I will destroy the imperial palace of your Qianyun kingdom. Your Qianyun kingdom will only exist in name from today onwards. The expressions of everyone present changed when they heard Jinshin's words. Now, no one doubted that Jinshin was joking. Being able to defeat two Heaven Saint Masters all by himself was enough to destroy the imperial palace of the Qianyun kingdom. Before a Heaven Saint Master who could control the energy of the world, the people present did not even have a chance of escaping. The people present were the upper echelons of the Qianyun kingdom. They were important figures who supported the operations of the kingdom. Once they all died, the Qianyun kingdom would only exist in name. The expression of the king of the Qianyun kingdom also became very ugly. In the end, he seemed to have thought of something and his eyes flashed. Senior, if you spare our Qianyun kingdom, this king can tell you a secret. Hearing this, Qianyan seemed to know what the king of the Qiangan kingdom wanted to say. His expression immediately changed, and he hurriedly said, "No, you can't tell anyone. Imperial ancestor, if our Qiangan kingdom is no more, then what's the point of keeping this secret?" The king of the Pingyang kingdom had a helpless expression. Clearly, he did not want to tell anyone this secret. Jinshin's eyes flashed with an undetectable light. "What secret?" "I know the location of a Saint King's cave. Senior, as long as you promise to let the Qiangan kingdom go and not invade our Qiangan kingdom for any reason in the future, then this king will tell you this secret." The king of the Qiangan kingdom said, and then looked nervously at Jinshin. Upon hearing that it was the location of the Saint King's cave, Jinshin's heart beat uncontrollably. The killing intent in his eyes also weakened a little. Obviously, he was tempted. Jinshin hesitated for a moment and then said, "What if you tell me that the Saint King's cave is a dilapidated place? Then I will be fooled by you." "Absolutely not." The king of the Qiangan kingdom said seriously, "The owner of this Saint King's cave was an imperial protector of our Qiangan kingdom thousands of years ago. In the end, because of the end of his life, he passed away in his own cave. In order to prevent anyone from disturbing his final years, he laid a powerful formation outside the cave before he passed away. For thousands of years, no one has been able to enter." Chapter 425. Definitely not. The king of the Qiangan kingdom sternly said, "The owner of the dwelling was an imperial protector of our Qiangan kingdom several thousand years ago. In the end, he reached the end of his life, so he passed away in his own dwelling. In order to prevent people from disturbing him in his final years, he cast down a powerful formation outside the dwelling before he passed away. In the past several thousand years, no one has been able to enter." Jinshin fell silent. The light in his eyes flickered as he hesitated. The news from the king of the Qiangan kingdom was very tempting to him. If this really was the dwelling of a saint ruler, he was certain that there would be a saint ruler skeleton or a ruler's armament inside. This was because these two items were items that every saint ruler who had passed away would leave behind. Saint rulers below the 9th heavenly layer would leave behind a powerful skeleton, while saint rulers above the 9th heavenly layer would leave behind their saint weapons. Both of them were priceless treasures on the Tian Yuan continent, enough to make all the peak clans on the Tian Yuan continent drool. However, although the king of the Qiangan kingdom had sworn that the dwelling was blocked by a powerful formation, preventing anyone from entering, Jinshin could not guarantee that the dwelling was still the same as before after all this time. If a supreme expert entered and took away all the valuable items, he would end up with nothing. The king knew that Jinshin was tempted when he saw the hesitation on Jinshin's face. He immediately became nervous. Whether or not they could protect the Qiangan kingdom today would depend on whether the saint ruler's dwelling could attract this young expert. "Senior, you must know better than me just how valuable a complete saint ruler's dwelling is. I can use this secret to exchange for the safety of the Qiangan kingdom, so you won't lose anything. Moreover, only the imperial ancestor and I know about this secret in the Qiangan kingdom. If you kill us, you won't be able to learn where the dwelling is." The king struck while the iron was hot as he attempted to convince Jinshin. Jinshin stood there and hesitated for a very long time. In the end, he could not resist the temptation of the saint ruler's dwelling and agreed to the king's suggestion. He said, "If the dwelling you speak of really is complete, I can spare your Qiangan kingdom. Senior, you must promise that you will not use this matter as an excuse to make things difficult for my Qiangan kingdom in the future. Only when my Qiangan kingdom is truly safe will I tell you the dwelling's location." The king of the Qiangan kingdom was not an idiot. He immediately voiced his concerns. He was also worried that Jinshin would use other excuses to deal with the Qiangan kingdom after obtaining what was in the dwelling. Jinshin naturally understood what the Qiangan kingdom was worried about. He nodded without any hesitation. "I can promise you that." The king of the Qiangan kingdom immediately let out a sigh of relief. Although the secret of the saint ruler's dwelling was very important, there was no point in keeping it a secret if he lost his life and the kingdom. Moreover, the protective formation outside the dwelling was extremely powerful. Qianyan had been there several times and failed to break in. To them, The secret was just a treasure box that could not be opened. Although they had it, they could not obtain the things inside. They could not obtain any benefits, so there was no point in keeping a secret. They could use it to protect the Qiangan kingdom. Next, the king of the Qiangan kingdom invited Jianshun to his study. He took out a map and handed it to Jianshun. He said, "Senior, this is where the dwelling is located. There is a protective formation outside. You can only enter through the formation. I will give you this map now. I hope you can keep your promise." Jianshun took the map and opened it. He gave a rough glance and discovered that the dwelling was not in the Qiangan kingdom. Instead, it was in a primitive mountain range 100,000 kilometers to the southwest of the Qiangan kingdom. Jianshun put the map away and said, "I hope you are not lying to me. If I find out that this map is fake, I will not spare you." "Senior, don't worry. This map is absolutely real. There is indeed a Saint King cave there. My imperial ancestor has been there several times, but he was not strong enough to enter." The king of the Qiangan kingdom said solemnly. Jianshun did not say anything else. He turned around and left. He had benefited greatly from this trip to the Qiangan kingdom. He had never thought that the Qiangan kingdom would have such a secret. The dwelling of a saint ruler was a treasure that would cause the peak clans of the Tian Yuan continent to fight over. After Jianshun left, the pale-faced Qian Yun walked in from outside. He seemed to be in extremely horrible shape. He was covered in blood, and his hair was disheveled. He did not seem like a sage at all. The king of the Qiangan kingdom immediately went up to support Qian Yun. He asked in concern, "Ancestor, are you all right? Are you heavily injured?" Qian Yun sat down in a chair with the help of the king. His face was gloomy. "Sigh, this is all my fault. I have dragged the kingdom down." "Ancestor, don't say that. It's all our fault for not being strong enough." The king comforted him. Qian Yun let out a long sigh. "Qian Feng, since Senior Kanada's dwelling has already been leaked, there's no need for us to keep it a secret any longer. The dwelling is protected by a powerful formation. Even a six-cycle heaven Saint Master would find it difficult to enter. We can't just let the people of the Jesson kingdom take advantage of us. Once I've recovered, I'll tell the other Peak clans about this." "Ancestor, won't that anger that expert?" The king of the Qiangan kingdom was rather worried. A cold light flashed through Qian Yun's eyes when he heard that. He said, "I won't tell the Peak clans about this secret for nothing. I will use this secret to exchange for that person's life." Jianshun had already left the imperial palace of the Qiangan kingdom. He returned to the kingdom of Jesson the same way he had come. Although his original plan of destroying the Qiangan kingdom's imperial palace had failed, he had obtained even greater benefits. He was in a rather good mood on his way back. An hour later, a small city appeared in front of him. It was a Class 2 city that Jianshun had stayed in the night before. Looking at the Class 2 city, Jianshun could not help but think about the appearance of the waiter in the inn. When he first saw the waiter's appearance, he immediately connected him to a person. Although their appearances were very different, Jianshun was still able to see some similarities. When Jianshun arrived above the Class 2 city, he could not help but descend. He landed on a bustling street that was filled with people. The bustling street immediately fell silent. The arrival of a Heaven Saint Master had stunned everyone on the street. All the passers-by stared at Jianshun with gazes of admiration and respect. The Qiangan kingdom had a population of over 700 million, but there were only 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Every single one of them possessed great statuses and rarely ventured out. Regular mercenaries would not even see one in their entire lives. The chances of an expert like that coming to a Class 2 city was extremely low. It was so low that they would not even see one in 100 years. Now that a living Heaven Saint Master had appeared before them, everyone on the street became stunned. Jianshun glanced around and frowned slightly. A layer of faint wind energy enveloped his body as he turned into a faint azure streak of light and immediately vanished. He left the street. It had only been over 2 hours since Jianshun had left the city in the morning. Jianshun passed through 2 streets and finally returned to the inconspicuous inn that he had stayed in before. As soon as Jianshun set foot in the inn, he suddenly became stunned. The inn was in a mess. All the tables and chairs had been knocked over, and many of them had been shattered. There were even some bloodstains on the ground. In front of the counter, the owner of the inn was crying with her head buried in the ground. Her clothes were covered in footprints. Jianshun gently made his way over and crouched down in front of the owner. He asked, "Owner, may I ask what happened here? Why has it become like this?" The owner of the inn raised her head. Her face was already covered in tears, and her eyes were red and swollen. When she saw that it was Jianshun, her expression immediately changed. Anger immediately appeared in her eyes, but she suppressed it very quickly. She immediately knelt down in front of Jianshun and constantly kowtowed. "Young master, I beg you. You must save my third son. You must save my third son." Jianshun helped the owner of the inn up and asked, "Owner, what is going on?" "Young master, all of this was done by Yang Jizong. Last night, Yang Jizong's people were bullied in our inn. Early this morning, they came with a large group of people to take revenge. They smashed my inn to this state. My third son was beaten up because he tried to stop them and was taken away," the owner of the inn said while crying. She was very sad. Hearing this, Jianshun's expression also changed. Now he also understood that all of this was caused by him. This inn was just implicated. "My third son, I feel sorry for him. You must be fine. You're my flesh and blood. If something bad happens to you, I don't want to live anymore." "Kindle, you damn Kindle. Where the hell did you go? You left for several years and didn't come back. Now my third son was taken away by Yang Jizong's people. You heartless Kindle. If you don't come back, you will never see us again." The owner of the inn wailed with a helpless look on her face. Chapter 426. The heart-wrenching woman did not notice the abnormality in Jianshun's expression. She continued to cry bitterly. "Young master, I'm begging you. I'm begging you. You have to save my third son. He's my only son. If anything happens to him, I don't want to live either." The lady boss was just an ordinary person without any background. She couldn't afford to offend a powerful force like Yang Jizong. Now, she placed all her hopes on Jianshun. This was because she knew that since Jianshun wasn't afraid of Yang Jizong, he must have an extraordinary background. Jianshun's hands tightly grasped the lady boss's shoulders. His eyes were filled with urgency and hope as he looked at the lady boss. He hurriedly said, "What did you just say? Kindle? Which Kindle are you talking about? Could it be that you and your son are Uncle Kindle's family?" Jianshun's body trembled slightly. His expression was extremely excited. He had never been this excited before. Uncle Kindle's family had always been his concern. He had been troubled by this matter countless times. Over time, this matter had almost become a sore point for Jianshun. Now that there was finally some news about Uncle Kindle's family, how could Jianshun not be excited? The lady boss finally reacted at this time. She reached out and wiped the tears on her face. She looked suspiciously at Jianshun and asked, "Young master, could it be that you know our Kindle? Kindle is my husband. He's my third son's father." Jianshun took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Then he slowly closed his eyes. He couldn't help but recall Uncle Kindle's face in his mind. Then he slowly raised his hands. All of a sudden, the yuan qi between heaven and earth surged wildly. Streams of colorful light visible to the naked eye quickly gathered between Jianshun's hands. The whole inn was filled with a layer of surging yuan qi. Looking at the light that suddenly appeared in Jianshun's hands like magic, the innkeeper was an ordinary person who had never seen such a scene before. She was immediately stunned. Her eyes stared at the colorful light that gathered in Jianshun's hands, entranced. Not long after, a face floated in front of Jianshun. Jianshun used his powerful will to control the qi of heaven and earth, using the qi of heaven and earth to draw Uncle Kindle's face according to the memories in his mind. Jianshun opened his eyes and looked at the inn's lady boss. Just as he was about to ask, the inn's lady boss exclaimed, "Kindle, this is Kindle. Young master, have you seen my Kindle before?" The inn's lady boss was very excited. Her face was filled with surprise. Kindle had been gone for many years without any news. She had been worried about him for a long time. Seeing the inn's lady boss recognize Uncle Kindle, Jianshun finally confirmed the identity of the mother and son. He was so excited that he could not control himself. With a trembling voice, he asked, "Auntie, look carefully. Is this person really your husband? It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. He is Kendall. He is Kendall. Young master, have you seen Kendall before? Where did he go? Why did he not come back after so many years? How could he be so cruel and leave us here to depend on each other for so many years?" The inn's lady boss's eyes were filled with tears. Jinshin's attitude toward the inn's lady boss suddenly changed. He quickly held the inn's lady boss and said with concern, "Annie, sit down first. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" Jinshin also changed the way he addressed the lady boss. Looking at the footprints all over the lady boss's clothes, a surge of anger rose in Jinshin's heart. Now that he knew that the landlady before him was Uncle Kendall's family that he had been searching for, Jinshin would never allow them to be bullied or mistreated. "Young master, have you seen our Kendall? Where did he go? Why did he not come back after so long?" The inn's lady boss missed Kendall very much. She kept asking Jinshin about Kendall. Jinshin's expression changed slightly. He stuttered, not knowing how to explain. When they were hunted down by the golden-haired Tiger King in a magic beast mountain range, Uncle Kendall died in order to save him. He had already left this world a few years ago. Not even his bones were left behind. After hesitating slightly, Jinshin immediately changed the topic. He said, "Auntie, let's talk about this later. Right now, let's hurry up and save Sanzi." Okay. Save Sanzi first. Sanzi is my only son. Nothing can happen to him. Young master, I beg you, please save my Sanzi." The lady boss pleaded. She had placed all her hopes on Jinshin. Jinshin's expression became serious. He said, "Auntie, where's Sanzi right now? I'll take you to him right now. Sanzi has been taken away by Yangji Zong's people. I don't know where he is right now." The lady boss sobbed. Jinshin pondered for a moment. He said, "Auntie, let's go find Yangji Zong's people first. It's been such a short time. Maybe they haven't left this place yet." After saying that, Jinshin pulled the lady boss and walked outside. Seeing that Jinshin was willing to help her, the lady boss's face became wild with joy. However, when she saw that Jinshin was alone, her expression couldn't help but become hesitant. She said, "Young master, Yangji Zong is a big sect in the Qiangan Kingdom. They have a lot of people. We should find some helpers." Jinshin smiled and said, "Auntie, don't worry. I will definitely save Sanzi. You should come with me." After saying that, Jinshin pulled the lady boss's sleeve and walked out. "Wait a minute, I will close the door of the inn." Yangji Zong had a great reputation in the Qiangan Kingdom. Wherever Yangji Zong's people stayed, almost everyone knew about them. It had been less than 2 hours since Sanzi was captured. Yangji Zong's people hadn't left the city yet. Jinshin casually asked around on the streets and knew where Yangji Zong's people were now. Jinshin took the lady boss directly to the place where Yangji Zong's people were temporarily staying. Along the way, they passed through 3 streets and arrived at the largest luxurious inn in the city. "Guest, do you want to stay or have a meal?" As soon as they entered the inn, the waiter in the inn greeted them with a warm face. But his eyes were full of curiosity as he looked at the lady boss who was covered in footprints and looked very embarrassed. His eyes flickered, and he didn't know whether to drive her out or not. Because with the lady boss's appearance, she was not qualified to enter this place at all. Jinshin ignored the waiter. He spread out his divine sense and covered the entire inn. Soon, he found a group of people suspected to be Yangji Zong's people, and then walked directly over with the lady boss. "Guest, what can I do for you?" The waiter immediately followed and surrounded Jinshin, nodding and bowing. Jinshin threw a gold coin to the waiter and said, "There's nothing for you to do here. Go do what you need to do." Yangji Zong's people were staying in a small, independent courtyard at the back of the inn. Jinshin walked through a door inside the inn to the independent courtyard, but just as he reached the door, 2 middle-aged men guarding the door stopped him. "Sir, this is the place of our Yangji Zong. Without an invitation, no one is allowed to enter." One of the middle-aged men expressionlessly said, "Yangji Zong, I'm looking for you." A cold light flashed through Jinshin's eyes. The energy of the world instantly gathered in his hand, and then he slapped the chests of the two middle-aged men with lightning speed. The two middle-aged men were only Saint Masters. In front of Jianshun, who was a heaven Saint Master, they were as weak as ants. They had no power to fight back at all. The two of them both spat out a mouthful of blood and were sent flying. They flew over 10 meters before landing on the ground. "Auntie, let's go in." Jianshun called out to the owner of the inn and strode in. The owner of the inn followed behind Jianshun in fear. The way she looked at Jianshun had also changed. She never thought that this young man, who seemed to be around the same age as her son, would be so powerful. He could send Yang Jizong's two powerful men to the ground with a flip of his hand. "How dare you? Who's causing trouble here?" Just as Jianshun entered, a loud shout rang out. Following that, several dozen people in the same uniform rushed out of the various rooms in the courtyard. They stared at Jianshun and the owner of the inn with extremely sharp gazes. Jianshun indifferently glanced at the group of people. The corner of his mouth curled up in disdain. However, the owner of the inn behind him could not maintain his composure. She could not help but lower her head under the several dozen sharp gazes. Her face was filled with fear, not daring to meet the eyes of the people in front of her. "Brat, who are you? Why have you barged into the territory of Yang Jizong?" A middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader shouted at Jianshun. His gaze was extremely sharp. Jianshun slowly crossed his arms in front of his chest. His expression was calm. The white tiger that he had brought with him was quietly lying on Jianshun's shoulder. It was very well behaved, its pair of bright eyes constantly looking around. "Call your leader out for me," Jianshun said expressionlessly. His tone was cold and emotionless. The middle-aged man flew into a rage and sternly shouted, "How presumptuous! Brat, who do you think you are? How dare you speak to us like that? You're simply not putting our Yang Jizong in your eyes. Arrest him and wait for the young master and third martial uncle to deal with him." "Yes," the crowd responded in unison. Immediately, more than 20 people took out their holy weapons and aggressively rushed towards Jianshun. Jianshun coldly snorted. On a small tree not far away, more than 20 leaves fell one after another. They turned into streaks of green light and shot towards the people who were rushing over. At this moment, the originally fragile leaves seemed to have turned into sharp pieces of iron in an instant. They slashed the throats of the 20 or so people who were rushing over. Chapter 427. Jianshun's method shocked the rest of the Yang Jizong people. Looking at the 20 or so people lying on the ground with blood flowing out of their throats, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. They were secretly glad that they did not rush forward. Otherwise, they would be lying on the ground now. The way the Yang Jizong people looked at Jianshun changed. There was an unconcealable fear in their eyes. Although Jianshun was much younger than them, the way he killed the 20 or so people shocked everyone. "Your Excellency, who are you?" The middle-aged man who spoke earlier shouted sternly. He had changed the way he addressed Jianshun from kid to Your Excellency. "Call out the people who are in charge here immediately. Otherwise, I will kill all of you," Jianshun said coldly with an expressionless face. "You?" The middle-aged leader was very angry. Yang Jizong had a very high status in the Qiangan kingdom. Even the princes of the kingdom did not dare to treat them with such an attitude. Jianshun's contemptuous attitude obviously showed that he did not put Yang Jizong in his eyes. This made the leader's heart burn with anger. However, he did not dare to act out because of Jianshun's strong strength. What happened? Who's making trouble here? At this moment, a deep voice came from behind. A man with long hair and black clothes walked out of the house. The man had a resolute expression and looked to be in his 50s. His bright eyes flashed with light from time to time. "Third martial uncle. Third martial uncle." As soon as they saw this man, the disciples of Yang Jizong bowed respectfully. The arrival of the third martial uncle gave the middle-aged man confidence. He said, "Third martial uncle, you came at the right time. Quickly arrest this boy. Not only did he make trouble here, but he also killed more than 20 disciples of Yang Jizong. This is simply unforgivable." The third martial uncle did not pay attention to the middle-aged man's words. He stared sharply at Jianshan and carefully sized him up. His expression slowly became serious. Although Jianshan looked like he was in his 20s, the third martial uncle could see that he was extraordinary at a glance. He was definitely not an ordinary person. "Your Excellency, who are you? Why are you against Yang Jizong?" The third martial uncle asked in a deep voice. His expression was not very good. "Third martial uncle, why are you talking so much nonsense with him? More than 20 disciples of Yang Jizong died at his hands. We must not let him off easily." The middle-aged man, standing next to the third martial uncle, gnashed his teeth and said. With the third martial uncle present, his confidence was boosted. The third martial uncle raised his hand to stop the middle-aged man. His sharp eyes were still looking at Jianshan, waiting for Jianshan's answer. Jianshan crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked calm. He did not put the third martial uncle in his eyes. Only the lady boss, who was standing behind him, trembled and hid behind him. She did not dare to say a word. "This morning, your Yangji Zone people captured a person. Release him immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude to you," Jianshan said in a deep voice. His tone became fierce as he spoke. The third martial uncle's expression suddenly changed when he heard Jianshan's words. His eyes became cold as he said in a deep voice, "Sir, do you know what the consequences of your words will be? Our Yangji Zone is not a sect that anyone can offend. I don't care what sect you are from. Release him immediately and kneel down to apologize. Otherwise, none of you will leave here alive today," Jianshan shouted. The person who was captured was Uncle Kindle's son. This matter would not be settled so easily. Arrogant. No matter how good the third martial uncle's temper was, he was still enraged. He said in a deep voice, "You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Then let me see what kind of ability you have." As soon as he finished speaking, a light blue scimitar appeared in the third martial uncle's hand. He tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly shot towards Jianshan. Jianshan coldly snorted and revealed a disdainful sneer. His fingers moved slightly, and an azure sword chi shot out from between his fingers, shooting towards the third martial uncle. Ding! With a crisp sound, the azure and violet sword chi accurately struck the third martial uncle's scimitar. The finger-sized azure and violet sword chi contained an unimaginable amount of power, causing the third martial uncle's charging body to come to a stop. Afterwards, his body was pushed back in the air. When his feet landed on the ground, he still uncontrollably took a few steps back. The third martial uncle stabilized himself with great difficulty, but his expression had already become extremely ugly. He looked at Jianshan in disbelief. He was unable to accept this reality. With his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he was actually unable to block a casual sword chi. After a while, the third martial uncle seemed to realize something. He looked at Jianshan in disbelief and cried out in a trembling voice, You're a Heaven Saint Master." Hearing this, the faces of the Yangji Zone people all changed. They all looked at Jianshan in disbelief. Their faces were filled with shock. "I'll count to 3. If I still don't see him, then none of you will be able to live," Jianshan coldly said. His gaze was extremely cold. He had already lost his patience. "Quick, go and bring him out for me." This time, the third martial uncle did not dare to be stubborn. Before Jianshan had even finished speaking, he had already given the order. The people from the Yangji sect were no longer as arrogant as before. They all looked at Jianshan with fearful gazes. As soon as they heard the third martial uncle's words, a few of them immediately ran off. Very soon, a person covered in blood was carried out by the Yangji Zone people. His hair was disheveled, and his body was covered in vicious wounds. Clearly, he had been whipped. Even his clothes had been torn to shreds. The owner of the inn, who had been standing behind Jianshan the entire time, immediately cried out when she saw the person covered in blood. She did not know where she found the courage, but she quickly rushed out from behind Jianshan and arrived in front of the young man who had been carried out. She wailed, "Sanzi, Sanzi, my Sanzi, why have you been beaten like this? My poor Sanzi." The third martial uncle's expression became somewhat ugly when he saw Sanzi beaten to such a state. Previously, he did not know that a waiter of the inn had the support of a heaven Saint Master, so he did not stop his subordinates. Now that Sanzi had been beaten to such a state, he did not know whether he would vent his anger on Jianshan. He immediately became somewhat uneasy. The young men of Yangji Zong slowly put Sanzi down. Then, they looked at Jianshan in fear and silently walked back. Jianshan arrived in front of Sanzi with a gloomy face. He crouched down to check on Sanzi's injuries. Suddenly, a powerful killing intent erupted from Jianshan, enveloping the entire courtyard. Jianshan's gaze suddenly became extremely sharp. A powerful killing intent soared into the sky as he shouted, "Yangji Zong, I, Jianshan, will destroy you." Chapter 428. Hearing Jianshan's declaration that he would destroy Yangji Zong, the expressions of the people in the courtyard all changed. Their faces became extremely ugly, and a trace of anger appeared in their eyes. Even though Jianshan's strength was very strong and made all of Yangji Zong's people fear him, the third martial uncle still couldn't help but shout, "Sir, I, Yangji Zong, am deeply rooted in the Qiangan kingdom. My strength is only below the imperial family. Have you thought about the consequences of your words? All of you die." The killing intent in Jianshan's eyes skyrocketed. Suddenly, all of the small trees in the courtyard exploded, filling the air with faint purple and green sword chi. They then shot towards Yangji Zong's people with lightning speed. Among Yangji Zong's people, only the third martial uncle was an Earth Saint Master. The rest of them were all Great Saint Masters or below. How could they block an attack that could make a Heaven Saint Master suffer? Without any resistance, they were riddled with holes and died. In front of such an attack, even the third martial uncle, who was an Earth Saint Master, was unable to block it. The wooden shavings imbued with azure and violet sword chi broke through his Saint Force defenses effortlessly, instantly creating several hundred holes in his body. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of Yangji Zong's people were all dead. Not a single one survived. Dark red blood dyed the ground red. The smell of blood permeated the air, making the originally pure air turbid. "Sanzi, my Sanzi, wake up. Don't scare me. Nothing can happen to you. If anything happens to you, I don't want to live anymore." The owner of the inn cried sadly in front of Sanzi, completely unaware of the changes in her surroundings. The killing intent in Jianshan's eyes slowly dissipated. He arrived in front of the owner of the inn and said, "Auntie, don't worry. Sanzi is still alive. He's just heavily injured and unconscious." Jianshan's voice was rather gloomy. His heart was heavy. He had just discovered that although Sanzi's life was not in danger, his saint weapon had been destroyed by Yangji Zong's people. According to the customs of the Tian Yuan continent, Sanzi would never be able to cultivate. He would forever be a powerless commoner. Hearing Jianshan's words, the owner of the inn's eyes immediately lit up. She stared at Jianshan with hope and said, "Really? Young master, is my Sanzi really still alive?" Jianshan nodded firmly and said, "Auntie, let's send Sanzi back first. Don't worry, since Sanzi is Uncle Kendall's son, this grudge will not end here. I will get justice for you and make Yangji Zong pay the price." The owner of the inn was filled with gratitude as she constantly thanked him. "Thank you, young master. I will never be able to repay your kindness in my entire life, even if I do anything for you in the future." Jianshan hurriedly stopped her from continuing and said, "Auntie, please don't say that. I owe Uncle Kendall a favor, so it's only right that I help you. Let's send Sanzi back first." Afterwards, Jianshan carried the unconscious Sanzi, who was covered in blood, out of the inn. Only when they left did the innkeeper discover that the several dozen people from the Yangji sect were all lying in a pool of blood. She was so frightened that her face turned pale. Although it wasn't that she had never seen such a bloody scene before, the people who died here were all people with great backgrounds. The Yangji sect was one of the top powers in the Qiangan kingdom. For a moment, she was deeply worried. When Jianshan carried the bloodied Sanzi through the main hall of the inn, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. After Jianshan left, the inn's waiter immediately ran to the courtyard where Yangji Zong's people were resting. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he saw the blood all over the ground and several dozen corpses lying around. His face immediately turned pale, and then he quickly reported this matter to the inn's manager. Not long after, a young man wearing a luxurious white robe and holding an expensive folding fan in his hand returned to the inn with a few guards. This person was the young master of Yangji Zong, the second son of the current sect leader. His status was noble enough to be on equal footing with the kingdom's princes. Previously, because he was shopping outside with a few guards, he was able to avoid this disaster. When the second young master of Yangji Zong saw the bloody scene in the courtyard, his expression changed greatly. After asking the waiter about the situation, he hurriedly left and rushed to Yangji Zong. He didn't stop for a moment along the way, not even caring about the corpses of his third martial uncle. Several dozen people from Yangji Zong had been killed. This was a huge matter that could not be hidden at all. Very soon, the news spread like wildfire through the entire city, and with the help of the mercenaries, it quickly spread in all directions. Very soon, everyone knew about it. Jianshan had no idea what was happening in the outside world. Right now, he was carrying the bloodied Three and the owner of the inn back to the somewhat old inn. Jianshan placed Three on the bed, then immediately took out a radiant spirit pill from his space ring and fed it to Three. After consuming the light divine pellet, the injuries on Third Son's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although his injuries seemed to be very serious, because his physical fitness was not very strong, his injuries healed very quickly. Not long after, the unconscious Three slowly woke up. However, he was currently extremely weak. Although his injuries had been completely healed by the Radiant Spirit Pill, there were still many hidden dangers left in his body due to the destruction of his Saint weapon. It would be very difficult for him to fully recover in a short amount of time. He would need some time to recuperate. However, in order for Three to completely recover, Jianshan generously took out 2 more Radiant Spirit Pills and fed them to him. After consuming 3 Radiant Spirit Pills, the miraculous healing ability of Radiant Saint Force finally allowed Three to completely recover. The period of weakness from the destruction of his Saint weapon was completely removed as well. However, Three was not happy at all after recovering. He knew the situation in his body extremely well. With his Saint weapon destroyed, he would be reduced to a cripple who could not cultivate in the future. He would forever live at the bottom of the Tian Yuan continent. Jianshan also understood Three's current feelings. He comforted him. Three, don't be too sad. Although you've lost your Saint weapon, your future days will be even better than before. I will also avenge you. I will make Yangji Zong pay a heavy price for you. Benefactor, I'm already extremely grateful that you've saved me. Yangji Zong is just too powerful. It's not worth it to incur their enmity for me. Three said with a gloomy expression. He was very depressed. Benefactor, thank you for saving our family's third son. He's right. Yangji Zong is very powerful. It's best if you don't offend them, or you'll get into trouble. The owner of the inn also sobbed. The two of them were ordinary people who lived at the bottom of society. Yangji Zong's strength had already left a deep impression in their minds. The two of them did not want Jianshan to take such a risk. After that, the innkeeper said to Sanzi, Sanzi, let's leave this place in the future. We'll go to a remote mountain village and live a peaceful life. We don't have to live in fear all the time. Hearing this, without waiting for Three to reply, Jianshan spoke first. How can that be? Auntie, Three, come with us to the kingdom of Jessin in the future. I'll let you live a good life. As for Yangji Zong, I'll definitely not let them off. If I don't avenge Three, how can I, Jianshan, face Uncle Kendall? Hearing Jianshan's last sentence, Three immediately became spirited. The sorrow on his face disappeared completely. He looked at Jianshan in surprise and asked, Benefactor, you know my father? Jianshan nodded slightly and said, Three, I'll tell you about your father when there's time. How are you feeling now? I'm fine now. I just feel weak all over. Three's voice was weak. He looked like he had no strength. Three, you should rest for today. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to Yangji Zong for revenge. On this day, the inn was closed for business. Jianxun stayed in the inn and didn't go anywhere. He wanted to protect the safety of the mother and son. However, in order to prevent the mother and son from asking about Uncle Kendall, he found a random reason to shut himself in the room and told them not to disturb him. Now, Jianxun really didn't know how to explain to the mother and son. Could he just tell them that Uncle Kendall was dead and no longer in this world? Now that three had encountered such a situation, Jianxun didn't want to make them sad. Jianxun sighed and muttered, "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have told them that I knew Uncle Kendall." At this moment, in the city lord's estate, all the officials of the city had gathered together to discuss the matter of Yangji Zong's group being killed. Several dozen Yangji Zong's people were killed in the city, and one of them had a very high status in Yangji Zong. This matter was no small matter. If it wasn't handled properly, all of them would be implicated. City Lord, the person who dares to go against Yangji Zong is definitely not a small figure. We can't afford to offend such a person. Moreover, the other party can easily kill an Earth Saint Master. This kind of strength is unmatched in our city. City Lord, I received news not long ago that a Heaven Saint Master has arrived in our city. I'm guessing that the destruction of the Yangji sect is most likely due to this mysterious expert, Jianxun said with a frown. What? A Heaven Saint Master? Heavens! This is not someone we can afford to offend. City Lord, it's best if we don't get involved in this matter. We can't afford to offend this expert. Let's leave it to Yangji Zone to handle. The officials of the city gathered together to discuss for a long time. In the end, they decided not to get involved in this matter. This matter was just too big. It wasn't something they could handle. The next morning, three and the owner of the inn changed into a new set of clothes and left the inn with Jianxun. On the street, Jianxun didn't try to hide anything. He directly controlled the wind and the surroundings to envelop the mother and son before taking them into the air. He flew in the direction of Yangji Zone, causing everyone on the street to be dumbfounded. Chapter 429. The Yangji Zone was very powerful in the Qingan Kingdom. It was only second to the imperial family, but its reputation had almost surpassed the imperial family. This was because the Yangji Zone had 2 Heaven Saint Masters, which was the same number as the imperial family. Aside from the Heaven Saint Masters, the number of Earth Saint Masters was no less than the imperial families. There were over 20 of them and several thousand disciples. It was truly a vast organization. The Yangji Zone was not a native organization of the Qingan Kingdom. Instead, it had been stationed there when the Qingan Kingdom had lost its former glory and declined. It had already been over 600 years since then. It had developed from an unknown sect to its current scale, and it even maintained a friendly relationship with the imperial family of the Qingan Kingdom. Almost every generation of the Yangji Zone was connected by marriage in order to improve their relationship. At this moment, in a majestic hall within the Yangji Zone, over a dozen people of various ages sat with stern faces. They were all the upper echelons of the Yangji Zone, so they could make decisions about everything within the Yangji Zone. In the center of the hall, a young man in luxurious white robes stood with a rather ugly expression. There were a few guards behind him, all of whom had respectful expressions. "Fair, is what you said true? Has your third martial uncle really been killed?" A middle-aged man sitting at the front asked with a stern face. "Father, this matter is absolutely true. Third martial uncle and several dozen of our Yangji sect's disciples were all killed in the inn. The guard behind me saw it with their own eyes. I believe that the news will soon spread throughout the Qingan Kingdom." The young man in luxurious robes solemnly said. His face was also very solemn. "Then do you know who killed your third martial uncle?" The middle-aged man followed up with another question. "I've heard some information from the inn's waiter. The initial conclusion is that the person who killed my Yangji Zone is a young man around 20 years old. As for his identity, I don't know," the young man said. Hearing this, the middle-aged man sitting at the front seemed to think of something. His expression suddenly changed, and his gaze immediately became sharp. He stared at the young man and asked in a deep voice, a young man around 20 years old, "Faye, do you know what he looks like?" The middle-aged man's change in expression stunned everyone present. Soon after, they seemed to have thought of something, and their expressions changed drastically. The young man was not stupid. He immediately noticed the change in the expressions of the upper echelons present. His heart immediately sank. He knew that the matter was probably more complicated than he had imagined. After a moment of silence, he said, "Father, I've never seen that person before, but from the waiter's description, I only know that he was extremely handsome. He had short hair Short hair, that's an inch long." The middle-aged man muttered in a low voice. His expression also became extremely grave. He muttered in a low voice, "It really is him. It's exactly the same as the Grand Elder's description. I didn't expect that he would come to our Huayun sect today after causing such a ruckus in the Imperial Palace. It seems that he has come for the kingdom of Jessin." The middle-aged man suddenly stood up and said, "Fei, you can leave now. I already know that person's identity. Perhaps our Yangji zone will face a calamity. For the next 2 days, go hide outside for a period of time. Once everything is calmed down, come back. I'll immediately go and ask the old sect master." Hearing this, the young man's expression suddenly changed. He did not think that the matter would be so serious. He cupped his hands and said, "Yes, father. I'll take my leave now." After the young man left, the middle-aged man looked around and said with a grave expression, "Everyone, I'm sure you all know that person's identity. Go and arrange your people. Regardless of whether or not he has come for our Yangji zone, we must make preparations." Although the news of Jianshan causing a ruckus in the Imperial Palace had been suppressed by the Imperial family, Yangji zone, a sect that had countless connections with the Imperial family, had received the news immediately. Thus, although the upper echelons of the sect had never seen Jianshan before, they were not unfamiliar with him. His appearance and features were all memorized by them. "Yes, sect master." The people sitting below all replied in unison before leaving with heavy expressions. After that, the sect master of Yangji zone personally went to the back of the mountain to report this matter to the old sect master. When the old sect master of Yangji zone heard about this matter, he immediately came out of the mountain with a slightly pale old man. He was a supreme elder of Yangji zone and had a noble status. From your description, I already know who this mysterious young expert is. Even if he is not from the kingdom of Jessin, he must be related to the kingdom of Jessin. We joined forces with the Blue Wind Kingdom to kill the experts of the kingdom of Jessin. In the end, because of this mysterious expert's appearance, we were defeated. 7 of us were killed by him with a sneak attack. His strength is not to be underestimated. The Supreme Elder with a slightly pale face said in a deep voice. He was one of the 2 people who survived the sneak attack of Jianshan. "Old Gao, your injuries have more or less healed, right? How confident do you think our Yangji sect is in stopping that expert?" The Yangji sect's old sect master's expression was very calm, as if he didn't take this matter seriously at all. That mysterious expert caused a ruckus in the palace yesterday. Even Qian Yun, who has reached the 5th rank, was not his opponent. With just the 2 of us, we have no chance of winning. The Supreme Elder, who was called Old Gao, said in a deep voice. Hearing this, the old sect master sneered with disdain and said, "If he is just making a ruckus, then I can let bygones be bygones. But if he dares to go too far, then he will regret it." A frog at the bottom of a well. Does he really think that I, Yangji zone, am a pushover? Old Yang, why do you say that? Do you have the confidence to deal with that mysterious expert? The Supreme Elder looked at the old sect master with suspicion. The old sect master smiled and said, "Let's go to the front mountain first." Yangji zone Holy Mountain was the base of Yangji zone's sect. A few hundred years ago, this mountain range was just a mountain with good scenery. In the Qiangan Kingdom, it was unknown, but ever since Yangji zone set up camp here, this mountain range was named Yangji Holy Mountain. As Yangji zone gradually grew stronger, the Yangji Holy Mountain's reputation also gradually spread. Today, the Yangji Holy Mountain had practically become the holy mountain of Qiangan Kingdom. Every day, there would be people coming to the foot of the mountain to ask for a master or join the Yangji Holy Mountain. Jianshan used the power of the wind element to bring the mother and son several thousand meters into the air. They flew directly into the Yangji Holy Mountain and finally landed in front of the mountain. When Jianshan arrived, the entire Yangji zone was already on high alert. Over 100 disciples were gathered at the entrance, guarding there with serious expressions. They were ready to fight. Jinshin's arrival was immediately discovered by the disciples guarding the entrance. Immediately, a middle-aged man shouted, "A heaven saint master has come. Quickly inform the sect master." Hearing this, all the disciples took out a whistle from their arms and blew into it. An ear-piercing sound was transmitted, carrying a strong, penetrating force that resounded throughout the entire mountain range. The entire Yangji zone began to stir. A large number of disciples put down the things in their hands and rushed in the direction of the whistle. A cold smile appeared on Jinshin's face. Yangji zone's appearance clearly showed that they were prepared. They knew that he would come. The innkeeper and her son stood behind Jinshin in fear. Although they already knew that Jinshin was very strong and was a heaven saint master, the Yangji zone's reputation in the Qiangan kingdom was just too great. It had already left a shadow in their hearts. Therefore, the mother and son were now filled with worry. They did not know if Jinshin could stop the thousands of people and countless experts of the Yangji zone by himself. The white tiger obediently crouched on Jinshin's shoulder. It blinked its bright eyes and nimbly jumped from Jinshin's right shoulder to his left. It then tightly grabbed onto Jinshin's collar with its front paws, stabilizing its body. Jinshin turned back to the innkeeper and said, "Auntie, Sanzi, you two stay here. Don't worry, with me here, no one can hurt you. Benefactor, you must be careful." Sanzi looked at Jinshin with a complicated expression and said in a low voice. Jinshin smiled indifferently. He then strode forward and grabbed at the air with both hands. The fire element in the surroundings immediately gathered, condensing into 2 fire elemental swords in the blink of an eye. They shot towards the tall entrance of the Yangji zone with a wave of heat. "Run!" The expressions of the hundreds of Yangji zone disciples guarding the entrance changed greatly. None of them dared to hesitate and immediately fled for their lives. Boom! With a loud boom, the tall entrance of the Yangji zone was directly submerged in a wave of fire. Rocks flew in all directions in the wave of fire. The dozens of disciples guarding the entrance had no time to escape. They were all swallowed up by the wave of fire and let out miserable screams. Suddenly, a fierce wind raged between heaven and earth. The fierce wind raged between heaven and earth, blowing the fire towards the interior of the Yangji zone. Some of the surrounding weeds and trees were set ablaze in the blink of an eye. The raging flames continued to spread into the distance. Soon, some of the wooden houses closer to the entrance were set ablaze. A fiery red flame rose and burned fiercely, emitting thick smoke like a black dragon circling between heaven and earth. Jinshin grabbed at the air with both hands, and 2 fire elemental swords condensed in the blink of an eye. They then turned into a fiery red light and shot towards the Yangji zone. The sky was covered in flames, and the flickering flames could be seen clearly even by the people at the foot of the sacred Yangji mountain. Chapter 430. Jinshin made a grabbing motion in the air, once again condensing 2 fire elemental swords and shooting them towards the sword chi. When the two collided, an intense energy fluctuation erupted in the air. The fire elemental swords and the sword chi dissipated at the same time. The sky was filled with flames, like a cloud of fire, sprinkling down from the sky, submerging the buildings below and setting a large number of houses ablaze. The buildings in Yangji zone were all made of wood, which had very weak fire resistance. Furthermore, the fire elemental swords condensed by Jinshin's world energy were not something that ordinary flames could compare to. Therefore, these wooden buildings were easily set ablaze. In the blink of an eye, the Yangji zone was burning with raging flames everywhere. Many disciples were shuttling back and forth between the burning wooden houses, moving some valuable items. Many people picked up wooden buckets filled with water and began to extinguish the fire, preventing it from spreading further. In just a few breaths of time, Jinshin had caused a huge commotion in Yangji zone. The lady boss of the inn, Sanzi, and the 2 mother and son stayed in their original positions, trembling with fear. They were all dumbfounded as they watched the scene unfold in Yangji Zone. Their expressions constantly changed. Sometimes they would be happy, excited that Yangji Zone had fallen into such a state. Sometimes they would be alarmed. Yangji Zone had long left a strong and invincible shadow in their hearts. Jinshin's actions had thoroughly offended Yangji Zone. The mother and son, who had always lived at the bottom of society, were worried that they and Jinshin would bring great trouble to themselves. "Mother, this young master is so powerful. Who is he?" Senzi stood there, cowering, and asked in a trembling voice. The Lady Bossavian shook her head blankly and said, "I don't know who this young master is. However, this young master seems to know your father. Since he is willing to help us, it seems that he has a good relationship with your father." Jinshin's eyes flashed as he looked ahead. Soon after, his body slowly rose from the ground, rising dozens of meters into the air. Opposite him, two old men in white robes quickly flew over from afar, facing Jinshin with a distance of 50 meters. The old lord of Yangji Zone looked down at the buildings that were filled with flames. His old face had long become very unsightly. He stared sharply at Jinshin and said in a deep voice, "Sir, who are you? Tell me your name." Jinshin's gaze casually swept past the two old men before landing on the great elder. Killing intent flashed through his eyes as he said, "I never thought that I would meet you here. You can escape today, but you can't escape forever. I failed to take your life 2 days ago, so you won't be able to escape today." Seeing Jinshin ignore him like this, a cold light flashed through the eyes of the old lord of Yangji Zone. Hearing Jinshin's words, the expression of the great elder of Yangji Zone changed slightly. He said in a deep voice, "Sir, even if I haven't seen the Heaven Saint Masters of the various kingdoms in this region, I've heard of them. There doesn't seem to be someone like you among them. Just who are you? Why have you interfered with the grievances between us and the kingdom of Jessin?" Jinshin sneered, "I've always been a member of the kingdom of Jessin. My visit here has nothing to do with the kingdom of Jessin. Your people from Yangji Zone destroyed the saint weapon of my old friend's son yesterday, reducing him to a cripple who can't cultivate. I can't rest easy if I don't take revenge for this. Today, I'll use your Yangji Zone's blood to atone for the sins of my old friend's son." Jinshin didn't waste any more words. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 fire elemental swords quickly condensed in front of him. With a flick of his hand, he shot them at the 2 people in front of him. The old lord of Yangji Zone and the great elder of Yangji Zone each sent out a sword chi to disperse the fire elemental swords that Jinshin had shot at them. The swords exploded into flames that filled the sky. They then pressed down on the buildings in Yangji Zone below. The great elder of Yangji Zone angrily roared. The water elemental energy in the surroundings surged wildly, gathering into a large ball of water above him very quickly. He then pointed a finger at the ball of water above his head, causing it to explode loudly. It turned into a torrential downpour in an attempt to extinguish the flames. The combination of water and fire immediately produced a sizzling sound. The rainwater was evaporated by the high temperature of the flames, turning into thick water vapor that rose from below. It covered the sky and the sun, filling up the entire sky. The world was shrouded in a thick layer of mist, making it impossible to see one's own fingers. Jinshin sneered and said in a cold voice, "Let's see if your water will extinguish my fire, or if my fire will evaporate your water." The fire elemental energy between heaven and earth surged wildly. Under Jinshin's will, the fire elemental energy within a radius of 15 miles gathered in his direction. A pink circle of light with a diameter of 10 meters quickly condensed above Jinshin's head. In the blink of an eye, it evolved from a faint pink circle of light into a fireball that burned with raging flames. The temperature between heaven and earth rose rapidly with the appearance of the fireball. Seeing Jinshin's actions, the 2 experts of Yangji Zone obviously knew what Jinshin was trying to do. Their expressions immediately changed. The old sect master of Yangji Zone did not dare to hesitate. Wielding a sword that was covered in a layer of dense, earth-yellow saint force, he quickly charged toward Jianshan in an attempt to stop him. Jianshan sneered. With a thought, the fireball immediately exploded with a boom, turning into a wave of fire that shot toward the Yangjizong sect's base. Shortly after, the origin energy of the sword spirits shot out from their right hands, stabbing out with lightning speed and colliding with the old sect master's sword. As soon as the two collided, the old sect master of Yangjizong's expression abruptly changed. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot and rapidly retreated in shock. A two-finger-sized hole had appeared in the saint weapon in his hand. Seeing the hole in the saint weapon, the old sect master of Yangjizong's face was filled with shock. He stared at Jianshan in disbelief and said with a trembling voice, Why? How is this possible? The old sect master of Yangjizong was greatly shocked by the scene before him. This was because in a battle between experts of the same level, even if the difference in strength was great, it was still impossible to destroy a saint weapon so easily. At this moment, the fire had already engulfed the Yangjizong sect's base. Countless buildings were set ablaze, and the entire base of Yangjizong had been turned into a sea of fire. A large number of burning disciples were tossing and turning in the sea of fire as they cried out miserably. Countless people had been burned to death by the flames. These flames were no ordinary flames. They were condensed from the elemental energy of the world and were extremely violent. Those who were not strong enough were unable to withstand it for too long. The disciples who were fortunate enough not to be caught in the flames all panicked and began to flee in panic. In this life-threatening situation, even the upper echelons of the Yangji sect lost their usual calmness and began to flee, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire and be buried in the sea of fire. A battle between Heaven Saint Masters could be said to be an earth-shattering force. Just the shock waves from the battle were not something that ordinary people could withstand. Even Earth Saint Masters would find it difficult to protect themselves. Whoosh! When the fire spread to the Yangji sect's encampment, heavy rain began to fall from the sky and began a battle with the raging flames below. Sizzling sounds rang out incessantly, and the high temperature of the water vapor shrouded the heavens and earth, blocking out the sun. The great elder of the extreme Zongzong sect hovered in the air as he constantly gathered the elemental energy of the world to resist the flames. The mother and son of the inn had already retreated far away. The flames in front of them were extremely hot, so the two of them did not dare to get too close. Right now, the mother and son were dumbfounded as they stared at the scene in front of them. Was the scene in front of them really the high and mighty Yangjizong that was as inviolable as an emperor? Looking at the pouring rain, a cold light flashed through Jinshan's eyes. He immediately abandoned the old sect master of Yangjizong and charged toward the great elder with the origin energy of the Azulite sword spirits. Seeing Jinshan actually charge toward the great elder, the old sect master's expression could not help but change. He hurriedly warned, "Old Gao, be careful. The energy in his hand is very powerful. Do not take it head-on." Hearing the old sect master's warning, the great elder of Yangjizong's expression slightly changed. He immediately stopped gathering the elemental energy of the water, and a palm-sized, light blue sword quickly condensed in his hand. Using the advantage of its length, he avoided Jinshan's origin energy and stabbed toward the great elder's chest. Jinshan used the origin energy of the Azulite sword spirits to engage in an intense battle with the great elder of Yangjizong. In just 3 exchanges, the great elder's saint weapon was struck by the origin energy of the Azulite sword spirits, immediately creating a 2-finger-sized hole in the saint weapon. He was heavily injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as Jinshan was about to give chase and end the great elder's life, a powerful pressure suddenly descended from the sky and locked onto Jinshan's body. At that moment, Jinshan felt as if the space around him had solidified, firmly locking his body in place. Moving was difficult, as if his entire body had sunk into a quagmire. A powerful aura radiated from the old sect master's body, soaring into the clouds. At that moment, the old sect master seemed to have transformed into a god of war, standing between the heavens and the earth. His white hair and robes fluttered in the wind. The long sword held high above his head emitted a dazzling light. Powerful energy constantly gathered, causing the space around it to distort, as if it could not withstand the pressure and would shatter. The winds and clouds in the sky changed. Fierce gales wreaked havoc in the world, blowing the sand and rocks from the ground into the air. Large amounts of burning buildings and wood flew in all directions. Even the lingering clouds that shrouded the mountain peak had completely disappeared in an instant. This is a heaven-tier battle skill. Jianshan stared at Yangji Zong in astonishment. He had never thought that the old sect master would actually possess a heaven-tier battle skill. This had indeed exceeded Jianshan's expectations. After returning to the kingdom of Jessin, he had seen many heaven saint masters, but there was no one else who possessed a heaven-tier battle skill other than Chang Bo and Chang Wuji. The imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, He Mingdong, naturally did not count as one of them. Jianshan's face became rather stern. The heaven-tier battle skill used by a heaven saint master was so powerful that even he had to be careful. He did not dare to be careless. Although he could easily kill heaven saint masters, this was all because of the strength of the sword spirits. If he did not use this strength, Jianshan would have to expend quite a bit of effort to kill any heaven saint master. Chapter 431. Down below, all the disciples of the Yangji Zone were dumbfounded. They all fled far away to look at the sky. They stared at the old sect master in shock and excitement. The fact that the old sect master had grasped a heaven-tier battle skill made them feel proud as his disciples. They all had the same thought in their minds, that the old sect master would definitely be able to kill the invading enemies with his heaven-tier battle skill. The revelation of the old sect master's heaven-tier battle skill shocked the upper echelons of the Yangji Zone. Even the current sect master was no exception. The Yangji Zone was founded by the old sect master and had existed for several hundred years. During that time, no one knew that the old sect master had actually grasped the heaven-tier battle skill. If it weren't for the fact that the invaders today were just too powerful, the fact that the old sect master possessed a heaven-tier battle skill would probably not have been known to the outside world. Heaven Saint Masters did not need much time to prepare their heaven-tier battle skills, so the old sect master finished charging up very quickly. He suddenly let out a roar that reverberated through the mountains. 100-meter-long streak of light shot out from the saint weapon in the old sect master's hand. It pierced the sky like a sword that held up the heavens. It was grand and majestic. Afterwards, the old sect master suddenly swung his saint weapon down toward Jianshan with lightning speed. The powerful aura shook the world as a dazzling light illuminated the surroundings. The energy that had been compressed to the limit was like a miniature sun, emitting a blinding light. Wherever the sword passed, the space there would violently distort. There were even extremely small cracks that were black in color. They were extremely eye-catching within the white light. Jianshan was firmly locked onto by the powerful aura of the heaven-tier battle skill. There was no way for him to dodge or escape. The only thing he could do was take it head-on. Jianshan's face was solemn as he used the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits to the limit. At the same time, his eyes became a strange violet color. His left eye flickered with a violet light, while his right eye flickered with an azure light. It was like a pair of ghostly eyes that emitted a will-o'-the-wisp. On the ground, several dozen trees suddenly rose from the ground. They floated into the air with faint azulate sword chi, flying toward the huge streak of light like moths to a flame. Jianshan followed behind, raising the origin energy of the azulate sword spirits to receive the attack. The ground around the mother and son in the inn suddenly rose up, forming a completely sealed fortress that protected the mother and son. The soil rapidly solidified and constantly thickened. Very soon, it became a rock that was as hard as steel. From a distance, boom! A huge explosion rang out as Jianshan and the old sect master's heaven-tier battle skills collided. The violent shockwaves of energy were like a flood, rushing out in all directions. The buildings in Yangji Zone that hadn't been engulfed by the sea of flames were as fragile as tofu in front of the powerful shockwaves. They were sent flying without any resistance. Wherever the shockwaves passed, everything in their path was mercilessly sent flying. Trees were uprooted, weeds were torn apart, and even a layer of soil was scraped off the ground. Only the rocks that protected the mother and son in the inn were able to withstand the shockwaves, but they were also covered in cracks. A moment later, when the energy shockwaves finally calmed down, the entire Yangji sect's encampment had long been destroyed beyond recognition. Everywhere was a mess. Even the wooden houses and pavilions had been blown away by the energy shockwaves, creating an empty space. The Yangji sect's disciples had all been hit by the powerful shockwaves, and painful howls could be heard everywhere. Some of the weaker disciples had even fallen off a cliff not far away, dying for their lives. The old sect master of Yangji Zong's sect hovered in the air with a pale face. A trace of exhaustion could be seen on his face. He didn't seem to care about the sect situation at all. At this moment, he was staring ahead with a solemn expression, and a trace of disbelief could be seen in his eyes. Jinshin was still hovering in the air. The origin energy of the sword spirits in his right hand was still exuding pure sword chi, but compared to before, his face was slightly paler. His clothes had become tattered, making him look like a beggar. A faint trace of blood had appeared on his forehead, passing through his nose, lips, throat, and other parts of his body, all the way to his abdomen. His clothes had also been torn in half, and one could clearly see his white skin underneath. The power of a heaven-tier battle skill was just too great. With Jinshin's ability, even if he used his full strength, he still wouldn't be able to block it without suffering any damage. After all, a heaven-tier battle skill was not an earth-tier battle skill. If it were an earth-tier battle skill, even if it was a high-level one, it wouldn't be much of a threat to Jinshin. He could block it with just the elemental sword. However, Jinshin couldn't block a heaven-tier battle skill so easily. Even if he used the origin energy of the sword spirits, Jinshin still suffered some injuries. You actually managed to block my heaven-tier battle skill. Yangji Zong cried out in disbelief. His heart was in turmoil. Although the heaven-tier battle skill he used was only a primary heaven-tier battle skill, he had studied it for several hundred years. He had already mastered it to the point of perfection. He deeply understood the power of that attack. Even if his opponent was a 6-cycle Heaven Saint Master, he definitely wouldn't be able to block it as easily as Jinshin. At the very least, he would be heavily injured. Jinshin's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, "I never thought that you would actually know a heaven-tier battle skill. However, even if you use it, it won't change anything." With that, killing intent surged in Jinshin's eyes as he charged toward the old sect master with the origin energy of the sword spirits in his hand. The old sect master's greatest trump card was the heaven-tier battle skill. Seeing that it was unable to heavily injure Jinshin, he had already lost the courage to fight. He immediately retreated in an attempt to increase the distance between him and Jinshin. "Old Yang, I'll help you. Let's work together to deal with him. I refuse to believe that the heaven-tier battle skill is only able to injure him on the surface." The great elder quickly flew over from afar as he swung his huge sword at Jinshin with a surging blue light. A gleam of light flashed through the old sect master's eyes when he heard that. He immediately understood and said, "That's right. Even a 6-cycle Heaven Saint Master wouldn't be able to block my heaven-tier battle skill so easily. Your injuries definitely aren't as light as they seem on the surface. You're still trying to act like nothing's wrong." The old sect master suddenly understood and was no longer afraid. His battle intent immediately surged as he advanced instead of retreating. His sword stabbed toward Jinshin with powerful ripples of energy. Jinshin looked at the two of them with a sneer. At this moment, the great elder had already approached Jinshin. His sword stabbed toward Jinshin's forehead with surging water attributed saint force. Jinshin's right arm suddenly shook as the origin energy of the sword spirits left behind a dazzling streak of light in the air. It collided with the great elder's sword at an extremely fast speed. The great elder knew how powerful the origin energy of the sword spirits was, so he did not dare to take it head-on. He suddenly pressed his sword downward, stabbing toward Jinshan's heart. Although Jinshan had lost his saint force and did not possess the same speed as before, his body was much stronger than before. He could use 80% of his speed with just his physical strength. His wrist nimbly rotated as the origin energy of the sword spirits chased after the great elder's sword. With a flash of light, the origin energy collided with the great elder's sword. A two-finger-sized gap immediately appeared in the great elder's saint weapon. The great elder's face suddenly changed as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even though he had tried his best to avoid clashing with the origin energy of the sword spirits, he was unable to completely avoid Jinshan's attack under Jinshan's purposeful attack. Myriad illusory swords. The old sect master Yangji Zong also approached Jinshan and used a high-level Earth tier battle skill without any hesitation. The sword in his hand turned into a sky full of illusory swords that enveloped Jinshan. The illusory swords overlapped and blotted out the sun. Every single illusory sword was completely condensed from energy and possessed great destructive power. Jinshan's eyes flickered with an azure and violet light. Countless pieces of rock rose into the air and shot toward the old sect master's Earth-tier battle skill with faint azure and violet sword chi. Each piece of rock was able to disperse a strand of sword chi. The dense amount of rock completely dissolved the old sect master's Earth-tier battle skill. At the same time, the origin energy of the sword spirits in Jinshan's hand turned into a streak of rainbow light, stabbing toward the great elder with lightning speed. Spurt. The origin energy of the sword spirits stabbed out from between the great elder's eyebrows and exited from the back of his head. It pierced through his head and obliterated his soul on the spot. His soul was obliterated as a result. Old Gao, the old sect master, cried out in grief. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Jinshan's left hand reached out with lightning speed and took the great elder's space ring. He then raised the origin energy of the sword spirits and slashed at the old sect master. The old sect master's expression changed. He no longer had the courage from before and immediately retreated. At the same time, he yelled, "You will regret your actions today. No matter who you are, I, Yangji Zong, will wipe out your entire family." Hearing this, Jinshan's face was filled with disdain. He chased after the old sect master and yelled, "From today onwards, the Yangji Zone will cease to exist. I'd like to see how Yangji Zone will destroy me. A frog in a well. Do you really think my Yangji Zone is just a small sect? The strength of my Yangji Zone is far beyond your imagination." The old sect master yelled out with great confidence. Jinshan's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He immediately stopped chasing after the old sect master and said, "Does Yangji Zong have some sort of deep background? Oomph. The strength of my Yangji Zong is far beyond your imagination. In front of me, Yangji Zong, you're just an ant. This is only one of the branches that I, Yangji Zong, have set up to observe the situation of the continent. Today, you've killed my Yangji Zong. In the future, I, Yangji Zong, will definitely send experts to wipe out your entire family." The old sect master yelled out. Jinshan sneered, "I don't care who you are. You won't be able to escape today." Jinshan did not waste any more words. The origin energy of the sword spirits began to glow with an almost tangible violet light. He then charged at the old sect master with great speed. He did not hide the intense, killing intent in his eyes. The old sect master's face was sunken. He yelled out, "You will regret offending my protector clan." As he said that, the old sect master took out a piece of jade from his space ring. He crushed it with his hand, and an inexplicable pulse of energy immediately surged out. The surrounding space began to violently distort before the old sect master's body vanished. Jinshan was shocked. He stared in the direction where the old sect master had disappeared in disbelief. He immediately closed his eyes and expanded his soul to cover a radius of 15 kilometers in an attempt to find the old sect master. However, to his disappointment, the old sect master seemed to have vanished into thin air. He was not within the range of Jinshan's soul. Chapter 432. What is this thing? It actually allowed someone to escape 15 kilometers away. Jianshan frowned slightly. His face was filled with doubt. He was very curious as to how the old sect master Yangjizong had managed to escape. Also, what was that piece of jade he had crushed before he escaped? Jianshan carefully recalled the old sect master's words and murmured, "A protector clan? Looks like this Yangjizong really is as he said. He's not as simple as he seems on the surface. But who cares what kind of organization he is? It's not like there aren't any large organizations that have enmity with me. One more doesn't matter. In this era, saint rulers rarely come out. An existence like that shouldn't personally come out for a small territory, like Yangjizong. As for a heaven saint master, that kind of expert doesn't pose much of a threat to me." Thinking up to this point, Jianshan calmed down quite a bit. Soon after, he looked at the messy scene below and the disciples of Yangjizong. He immediately thought of how Sanzi's saint weapon had been destroyed by the disciples of Yangjizong. Killing intent immediately erupted from his eyes as he coldly said, "From today onwards, the Yangjizong no longer exists. Everyone will pay 100-fold, 1,000-fold for what you've done." Jianshan slowly closed his eyes. With his mind, he controlled everything in the world. Dozens of trees in the distance suddenly exploded, filling the sky with wood shavings. Like moths to a flame, the wood shavings shot towards the scattered disciples like moths to a flame. They were so densely packed that they blotted out the sun. It was as if 10,000 arrows had been shot at the same time. It was a terrifying sight. Faced with such an attack, the ordinary disciples of the Yangji sect were unable to resist at all. In the blink of an eye, their bodies were pierced by dozens of bloody holes. Many of the disciples didn't even understand what was going on before they were shot to death by dozens of wooden shards and rocks. Some of the people who had their throats pierced could not even hear the miserable cries of those who had their throats pierced. The scene was a complete massacre. Jianshan's mind covered a radius of 15 kilometers. Nothing in this area could escape his senses. Even an ant on the ground could be clearly sensed, so the disciples of Yangjizong had no chance of escaping. The dense wood shavings directly locked on several thousand disciples and began a bloody massacre. The current sect master of Yangjizong and a few Earth Saint masters only lasted for less than a breath's time under this storm-like attack. The protective saint force around their bodies was dispersed, and their bodies were pierced into a hornet's nest. Countless blood swords shot out of their bodies like fountains. It was a ghastly sight. In just a few breaths' time, all the thousands of disciples within 15 kilometers of Yangjizong died. Every one of them had dozens or even hundreds of bloody holes on their bodies. Bright red blood surged out and dyed the ground red. Not long after, it gathered into a river of blood that flowed up and down. The entire area was filled with a thick smell of blood. The purple light in Jianshan's eyes slowly dissipated. His eyes gradually returned to normal. He coldly looked down at the scene below. Soon after, the space rings on the hands of the upper echelons of Yangjizong left their fingers and quickly flew towards Jianshan in the air. In the end, they were caught by Jianshan. There were more than 10 of them in total. After that, Jianshan's mind covered the entire Yangjizong and took away all the cultivation manuals and monster cores in Yangjizong. Although these manuals did not interest Jianshan, they were still a fortune. In addition, the monster cores stored in Yangjizong were also very abundant. Although it was not as good as the treasury of the Pingyang Kingdom, it was not far off. There were more than 40,000 monster cores in total. Among them, there were 2 Class 6 monster cores, 300 Class 5 monster cores, and the rest were Class 4 monster cores and below. In such a short period of time, he had obtained tens of thousands of monster cores. This made Jianshan sigh in his heart. A few years ago, Jianshan was still desperately fighting against magical beasts for monster cores. Now he had casually wiped out a sect and obtained such a huge harvest. This made Jianshan deeply understand the benefits of great strength. Jianshan calmed himself down. He came to the huge rock that was full of cracks outside Yangjizong's mountain gate. When the old sect leader of Yangjizong used the heaven rank combat skill, Jianshan controlled the earth element in the surroundings to form this huge rock to protect the mother and son in the inn. This was to prevent them from being affected. This was because it's such a close distance. The aftermath of the heaven-rank combat skill was enough to cause devastating damage to ordinary people like them. It was far beyond what they could withstand. With a thought, Jianshan silently split the huge rock into two halves, revealing the mother and son who were hiding inside. At this moment, the mother and son were standing there with pale faces, not knowing what to do. "Auntie, Sanzi, I have avenged you." Jianshan came to the mother and son's side and said softly. He looked at Sanzi with a trace of guilt in his eyes, because he was the one who had caused Sanzi to end up like this. The innkeeper and Sanzi stared at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. What appeared in front of them was a large expanse of empty ground. There was a large patch of soil on the ground that had been scorched black by the flames. The originally densely packed buildings had completely disappeared, leaving behind a mess. Even further away, large patches of corpses were strewn all over the ground. Corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. Looking at the scene in front of them, the mother and son were so shocked that they were speechless. Their expressions were filled with shock. It was hard for them to imagine that Jianshan had actually reduced the incomparably powerful Yangji Zong to such a state by himself. Was the scene of corpses strewn all over the ground really caused by the strength of a single person? The mother and son were stunned by Jianshan's unbelievably powerful strength. It was only at this moment that the two of them suddenly understood that Jianshan's strength was far beyond their imagination. "Auntie, Sanzi, come back with me to the kingdom of Jessen. I will let you live a good life. You will no longer have to live in fear all the time like before. I promise you that no one in the kingdom of Jessen will dare to bully you." Jianshan spoke with a gentle voice full of concern. The innkeeper was the first to react. When she heard Jianshan's words, she immediately shook her head and said gratefully, "Sir, thank you for your kindness. You have already helped us a great deal. We do not want to trouble you and cause you more trouble. I have already decided to leave with Sanzi and go to a small mountain village to live a peaceful life." "How can that be? Auntie, come with me. I, Jianshan, swear that I will let you live a good life in the future." Jianshan hurriedly tried to persuade her. He would not let Uncle Kendall's family live such a hard life. After that, Jianshan spent a lot of effort to convince the mother and son to move to the kingdom of Jessen. After convincing the mother and son, Jianshan let out a sigh of relief. He then took the mother and son into the air and left the holy mountain of Yangji. After Jianshan left, on the holy mountain of Yangji, there were scattered disciples walking around the sect with dull expressions. Not all of Yangji Zong's disciples had died. Some disciples 15 kilometers away from Yangji Zong had luckily escaped. Although there were still disciples left in Yangji Zong, the upper echelons of Yangji Zong had all been killed. Only the old sect master had escaped by some unknown means. Now, Yangji Zong only existed in name. As a number one sect in the kingdom of Qiangan, Yangji Zong had a lot of people gathering at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji every day. So, everyone at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji could hear the soaring flames and deafening explosions clearly. At this moment, many people had gathered at the foot of the holy mountain of Yangji, pointing their fingers at the towering mountain peak and discussing it. Did something good happen to Yangji Zong today? They kept setting off firecrackers. That's not right. I clearly saw the soaring flames on the holy mountain of Yangji just now. Look, even some of the clouds in the sky are still black. Could it be that something big has happened in the Yangji sect? From the looks of it, it seems like some top experts are fighting. Are you stupid? Yangji Zong is so powerful. In the kingdom of Qiangan, who dares to go against Yangji Zong? Yangji Zong is the number one sect in the kingdom of Qiangan. They also have quite a good relationship with the royal family. In the kingdom of Qiangan, there is no force that dares to offend Yangji Zong. Many people who had come to join Yangji Zong and wanted to become his disciple were discussing spiritedly. They all voiced their guesses. Look, someone has flown away from the holy mountain of Yangji. It's a heaven saint master. Suddenly, a sharp-eyed person pointed at the sky and cried out, A heaven saint master has flown away from the holy mountain of Yangji. Did something really happen to Yangji's zone? A few quick-witted people immediately linked the holy mountain of Yangji to the strange phenomenon that had occurred earlier. Their expressions immediately changed. Since there are no Yangji zone disciples here to stop us, why don't we go up and take a look? Immediately after, the people who had gathered at the foot of the mountain started to climb up the holy Yangji mountain. Very quickly, they arrived at the Yangji sect's encampment. However, the scene in front of them made everyone's eyes widen. Yangji zone has been destroyed. After a long time, a cry of surprise came out of nowhere and woke everyone up. The news of Yangji zone's destruction could not be concealed at all. Afterwards, the news spread like wildfire throughout the kingdom of Qiangan, shaking the entire kingdom. However, none of this had anything to do with Jianshan. At this moment, he was bringing the innkeeper and her son back to the eastern fort of the kingdom of Jessan after a few hours of flight. Chapter 433. In the 2 days that Jianshan had been away, the kingdom of Jessan's eastern fort was very peaceful. The Blue Wind Kingdom's army did not attack again. As for the first-class city where the Eastern Fort's army was stationed, both sides of the collapsed walls were filled with craftsmen. Tens of thousands of craftsmen began to rebuild the tall walls, dividing up the work in an orderly manner. Jianshan flew directly into the city with the mother and son pair. In the end, he descended in front of the inn that had been converted into a temporary command post. When his feet touched the ground, the mother and son pair's legs went soft, and they almost lost their balance and fell to the ground. The owner of the inn was a person who could not cultivate saint force in the first place. As for the 3 children who had condensed saint weapons, they had become ordinary people after their saint weapons were destroyed. Their bodies were very weak, and after flying for so long, the mother and son pair's legs had already become numb. Jianshan's descent from the sky immediately alarmed the soldiers guarding the inn. They all shouted and rushed over, surrounding Jianshan from afar. Their faces were very serious, and they did not know whether Jianshan was a friend or foe. Such a scene immediately made the mother and son pair nervous. They hid behind Jianshan while trembling with fear, wondering if the scene of Yangji zone would repeat itself. A person who looked like a military officer walked out from inside. When he saw Jianshan, his face immediately changed, and he quickly shouted to the surrounding soldiers, "What are you doing? This is Lord Imperial Protector. Quickly greet Lord Imperial Protector." Jianshan's identity was known by many high-ranking military officers, but to the ordinary soldiers, there were not many people who could recognize Jianshan. Although Jianshan had displayed extraordinary strength in the battle outside the city, there were very few people who could see his face clearly. Hearing the military officer's words, the soldiers let out a sigh of relief and bowed to Jianshan. "Greetings, Lord Imperial Protector." However, all the soldiers were very curious. They did not know when the kingdom of Jessan had an Imperial Protector. Not only had they never heard of him before, but he was also ridiculously young. The military officer immediately arrived in front of Jianshan. He first bowed to Jianshan and said respectfully, "Lord Imperial Protector, this subordinate is Lin Yan. How may I be of service to Lord Imperial Protector?" "Is General Liu here?" Jianshan asked. As soon as Jianshan finished speaking, he looked into the inn and saw General Liu in armor quickly walking in from outside. He came in front of Jianshan and bowed respectfully to Jianshan. "Lord Imperial Protector, you are finally back. Did anything happen in the 2 days I was away?" Jianshan asked calmly. General Liu shook his head and said, "Nothing bad happened, but there was a lot of good news. Lord Imperial Protector, let's go in and talk." "All right." Jianshan nodded and agreed. He then turned to look at the mother and son in the inn and said softly, "Auntie, Sanzi, you should rest here for 2 days. You haven't eaten all day, so you must be hungry." Jianshan treated the mother and son in the inn with concern from the bottom of his heart. Old General Liu's gaze also landed on the mother and son in the inn. With his sharp eyes, he could tell with a single glance that the mother and son were people who lived at the lowest level of society. Their expressions were filled with unconcealable fear, and even their gazes were evasive when they looked at him. General Liu was a little confused. He did not know what the relationship between the mother and son and the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. The innkeeper did not have any objections and said, "I will do as benefactor says." Jianshun smiled bitterly and said, "What benefactor? Auntie, you can just call me Jianshun in the future." How can I do that?" The innkeeper suddenly became a little helpless. Although she lived at the lowest level of society, she still knew a little about etiquette. Even this seemingly high-ranking general had to bow to Jianshun and address him as the imperial protector. However, she directly called Jianshun by his name. This made her feel a little terrified. After hearing Jianshun's words, General Liu and the officer who had come out earlier both changed their expressions. The two of them looked at each other and saw a trace of surprise in each other's eyes. Immediately, the way they looked at the mother and son in the inn changed greatly. This was because neither of them knew the name of the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. However, at this moment, this imperial protector was treating the mother and son in such a friendly manner. Even with his noble status, he actually took the initiative to let the mother and son call him by his name. This was enough to show that the relationship between the two of them was not ordinary. This made General Liu and the officer's thoughts become active. Although it was very difficult to establish a relationship with the Qin Empire's imperial protector directly, they could do it from the side. The identity of the Qin Empire's imperial protector was too special. If any family in the Kingdom of Jesson were to establish a relationship with the Qin Empire's imperial protector, it would be a great honor for the family. Even if they were from a small family, they would instantly become an existence that no one dared to provoke. After that, the old general called over an officer of high status. This officer was a member of the old General Liu's family and had the same bloodline as the old General Liu's. He asked him to personally entertain the mother and son duo at the inn and treat them as VIPs without the slightest neglect. He also whispered something in the officer's ear. Following this, the officer's expression changed. He immediately put on a smile and respectfully invited the mother and son in. His warm attitude made the mother and son feel very uncomfortable. Even their movements were restricted, and they did not know what to do. After all, they were facing a high-ranking officer. Afterwards, Jianshun and General Liu went to a room with good soundproofing. Xiao Dian, Kafir, and another expert from the Kingdom of Jesson who had received the news also hurried over. They gathered together and reported the situation of the past 2 days to Jianshun as subordinates. Lord Imperial Protector, as of this morning, we have received news from the northern and western fortresses. The armies of the Qiangan Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom have retreated from our Kingdom of Jesson's territory. Furthermore, the two kingdoms have sent envoys in hopes of negotiating with our Kingdom of Jesson, General Liu said. Hearing this, Jianshun smiled. This news was indeed great news for the Kingdom of Jesson. With the two kingdoms retreating, the pressure on the Kingdom of Jesson would be reduced by a lot. What's the situation at the southern fortress? Jianshun immediately asked. Lord Imperial Protector, we received news from the southern fort yesterday. A few Imperial Protectors from Qin Huangju have already arrived at the southern fort. The expert from both sides had a huge battle in the wilderness. 2 experts from the Amles Kingdom fell, while the remaining experts from the Amles Kingdom fled without a fight. Currently, the Amles Kingdom's army has retreated to a location 100 miles away, biding their time. General Liu spoke with unconcealable excitement on his face. It could be said that the Kingdom of Jesson had completely survived the ordeal. Jianshun nodded slightly. This was within his expectations. Of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Qin Empire, only Xiao Tian remained in the eastern fortress. The other 4 had gathered in the southern fortress. Coupled with Chang Wuji and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Jesson, the number of Heaven Saint Masters in the southern fortress had reached a terrifying 8. Unless something unexpected happened, the Amles Kingdom would not be able to breach the southern fortress even if they sent all of their Heaven Saint Masters. This was because the imperial advisors of the Qin Empire were just too powerful. Each of them could easily fend off 2 opponents of the same level, and all of them possessed Heaven-tier battle skills. General, there's important news." At this moment, a loud voice rang out from outside the room. General Lu's face immediately became stern. He yelled, "Come in." The door opened, and an armored general walked in. He respectfully bowed to Jianshun and the 3 Heaven Saint Masters before taking out a letter. He said, "General, the army of the Blue Wind Kingdom has begun to retreat. At the same time, they have sent a letter of surrender." General Lu's face lit up. He quickly took out the letter of surrender and began to read it. A happy smile gradually appeared on his face. "Fantastic, fantastic." This letter was personally written by the king of the Blue Wind Kingdom. Not only did they withdraw their army from the kingdom of Jessin, they are also willing to compensate us for our losses. Currently, the ambassador from the Blue Wind Kingdom is also on their way. They hope to discuss further with the kingdom of Jessin. Hearing this, the principal of the Kargath Academy and the other Heaven Saint Master of the kingdom of Jessin revealed a smile. Their faces were filled with unconcealable excitement. Currently, the situation at the 3 forts in the east, west, and north of the kingdom of Jessin had stabilized. Only the Anles kingdom in the south had yet to withdraw their army. However, the people present were not worried at all. The southern fort of the kingdom of Jessin had gathered 8 Heaven Saint Masters. It could be said that the Anles kingdom did not have the ability to break through the blockade of 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Their withdrawal was only a matter of time. The people present calmed down very quickly. General Lu sat back down and said, "Imperial Protector, did your trip to the Qiangan Kingdom go smoothly?" "Yes." Jianshun nodded slightly and said, "You don't have to worry about the Qiangan Kingdom. It's already been resolved. Their king has also promised that he will not do anything harmful to the kingdom of Jessin." "That's good, that's good. It's been hard on you, Imperial Protector. The assistance you have provided to the kingdom of Jessin will be deeply remembered by all the citizens of the kingdom of Jessin. It will never be forgotten." General Lu's face was filled with gratitude. Afterward, the principal of the Kargath Academy, Kafir, and the other expert of the kingdom of Jessin also expressed their gratitude before the crowd dispersed. Jianshun carried the little white tiger to the room where the mother and son were resting in. He just happened to see the military officer that old General Lu had arranged for him to greet the mother and son warmly, as if he was very close to them. On the dining table, there was already a plate of hot delicacies, giving off an alluring aroma that whetted one's appetite. Chapter 434. As soon as he saw Jianshun enter, the officer immediately greeted Jianshun respectfully. Jianshun dismissed the officer before saying to the mother and son, "Auntie Sanzi, are you used to living here?" "It's all right. It's just that the general is a little too passionate. It's a little unbearable," the owner of the inn replied. Afterward, Jianshun conversed with the mother and son and finally learned their names. The owner of the inn was called Shunfang. She was born in a small mountain village, and her parents had passed away early. She grew up in the same village as Uncle Kendall and had fallen in love with each other since they were young. After they grew up, they were arranged to get married by the villagers. Sanzi's name was Ken III. It sounded a little old-fashioned, but people who grew up in a small mountain village did not have good names. As a result, under Kendall's suggestion, Ken III became Sanzi's name. Kendall was the strongest person in the village in terms of cultivation. He had condensed a saint weapon at the age of 21 and would often hunt in the mountains. He would bring back some wild beasts to share with the villagers. He was deeply respected by everyone in the village. However, although life in the village was rather comfortable, Kendall had left the village soon after his third son was born due to the lack of resources. He wanted to increase his strength as quickly as possible and also for his son's future. He wandered the Tianyuan continent by himself. In the past 20 years, Kendall would return home every once in a while. He would bring back quite a lot of money each time, greatly improving the living conditions of the family. He even left behind 2 Class 1 monster cores for Sanzi's cultivation. As time went on, Kendall's family became wealthier and wealthier. In the end, they opened a small inn in a Grade 2 city in the Qiangan Kingdom and stayed there for 10 years. Benefactor, my Kendall used to come back at least 2 or 3 times a year. I don't know what happened to him in the past few years, but he hasn't come back even once. There's no news from him at all. Benefactor, Tell me, where's my Kindle now? Shun Fong asked again, her face full of hope. Jianshan sighed inside when he heard that. However, he did not show it on the surface. He said, Annie, Uncle Kendall received a very lucrative mission a few years ago, so he went to a very distant kingdom with a group of people in a hurry. Just the journey would take a year or two, but he's been gone for so long. I believe he'll be back very soon. Jianshan did not want to tell this sad matter to the mother and son. He could only make up a lie to fool them. Although he knew that this matter would be discovered sooner or later, he could delay it for as long as possible. He believed that the mother and son would realize that something had happened to Kendall. At that time, they would at least be mentally prepared. Then, it would not be too late to tell them the truth. At the very least, their tolerance would be stronger. Shen Fong did not doubt Jinshan's words. Her face suddenly showed a trace of realization. She murmured, No wonder our Kindle hasn't come back for so many years. It turns out that he went on a long journey. Jianshan stayed for a while before leaving. As for Shun Fong and her son, Jianshan had already made arrangements for them. He planned to bring them to Lore City and settle them down in Chanyang Prefecture. With his current status, he believed that no one in Chanyang Prefecture would dare to oppose his decision. For the sake of the two of them, Jianshan purposefully stayed for an extra day so that the two of them could have a good rest. Otherwise, he would have left in a hurry to fly to the Chanyang clan. Early the next morning, news came from the southern fortresses. The army of the Antilles Kingdom had completely retreated from the Kingdom of Jesson. At the same time, the king of the Antilles Kingdom had also issued a letter of surrender and promised to compensate the Kingdom of Jesson for the war. In addition, the Antilles Kingdom had also temporarily formed a special group of ministers and princes to head to the Kingdom of Jesson. They were very sincere. At the same time, General Liu also received an imperial edict from the king of the Kingdom of Jesson, requesting the leaders of the various fortresses to closely monitor the situation of the enemy's retreat. At the same time, the army would advance and reoccupy the border fortresses. At this point, the war that had lasted for a few months finally came to an end. However, the final result made everyone's jaws drop. They felt that it was very unbelievable. Some of the surrounding kingdoms that did not participate in the war sent out a large number of spies to gather the latest information. Before long, a shocking piece of news rapidly spread. However, only the leaders of the various large organizations and important figures of the kingdoms knew about it. They were immediately speechless from shock. The Kingdom of Jesson had actually allied with one of the 8 great empires of the continent, the Qin Empire. Although the Qin Empire was very far away, hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, the deterrence of one of the 8 great empires was still extremely great. No one dared to look down on it. Other than that, an extremely young and mysterious expert had mysteriously appeared in the Kingdom of Jesson. First, he had wreaked havoc in the imperial palace of the Pingyang Kingdom, capturing the Pingyang king in front of all the officials. Then he had wreaked havoc in the imperial palace of the Qiangan Kingdom, killing 2 experts in the palace. In the end, he had annihilated the strongest organization in the Qiangan Kingdom, Yangji Zone. In total, he had killed over a dozen Heaven Saint Masters from 3 kingdoms. Everyone who heard this news was shocked. Has the peerless ancestor Chanyang returned? It doesn't seem to be anyone else with such battle prowess apart from him. Has the ancestor Chanyang broken through? Many experts thought of the same person as soon as they heard this news. However, after this matter, the status of the Kingdom of Jesson rapidly rose due to its relationship with the Qin Empire. Even a few powerful kingdoms that were tens of thousands of kilometers away received the news and sent their own envoys to the Kingdom of Jesson with gifts. 40,000 kilometers away from the Kingdom of Jesson, there was a kingdom called the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. The Heavenly Eagle Kingdom was one of the few powerful kingdoms within 100,000 kilometers. It was extremely powerful, 2 times the size of the Kingdom of Jesson. There were 16 known Heaven Saint Masters in the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. In the imperial palace of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, the kings sat in a majestic hall. An old man and a young man knelt before him with their heads lowered. The king gently sighed as he sat on the dragon throne. He murmured, I never thought that the kingdom of Jessen would have connections with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms. The Qin Empire has even sent a few imperial advisors to assist us. How unbelievable. The king glanced at the 2 people below and said, "My son, Prime Minister Che, I have summoned you today because I have an important mission for you. The 2 of you will immediately set off tomorrow morning with gifts to the kingdom of Jessen. You will investigate the relationship between the kingdom of Jessen and the Qin Empire. Prime Minister Che, I trust you know what to do next." This old subject understands. The old man kneeling below bowed and said, "Yes." The king of the heavenly eagle kingdom pondered for a moment before speaking again. The land that the kingdom of Jessen occupies has many fertile lands. If they're given time, they will develop into a country that is no weaker than our heavenly eagle kingdom. No matter what the relationship between them and the Qin Empire is, it is worth it for us to rope them in. This will be of great benefit to our heavenly eagle kingdom. I have heard that the king of the kingdom of Jessen dotes on his daughter, Princess Glan. She is also known as the most beautiful woman in the kingdom of Jessen. She is naturally beautiful and has great talent in cultivation. My son, the main purpose of your trip is to propose marriage to the king of the kingdom of Jessen. I hope that our heavenly eagle kingdom and the kingdom of Jessen will be able to form a marriage alliance. I will obey father's orders. The battle in the kingdom of Jessen had come to a complete stop. The Heaven Saint Masters stationed in the surroundings had all returned. The next morning, Jianxin and Xiao Tian planned to leave as well. However, before they left, General Lu suddenly found them and said, "Imperial Protector, our king has already set up a banquet in the Imperial Palace. He sincerely welcomes the Imperial Protector's assistance. He hopes that you can come to the palace for a chat so that we can play host to you." Jianxin refused without any hesitation. "I still have important matters to attend to, so I won't be going." "Xiao Tian, you go in my place." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Xiao Tian clasped his hands. A trace of regret appeared on General Lu's face when he heard this. However, he also understood that it was indeed a little beneath the status of the Qin Empire's Imperial Protector to attend a banquet like this. Even sending an ordinary Imperial Protector to a banquet like this was giving the kingdom of Jessen enough face. "Imperial Protector, where should I go to find you?" Xiao Tian asked. "Go to Lore City to find me. I should be staying there for quite some time." Jianxin replied without any hesitation. Lore City. General Lu, who was standing at the side, memorized this name in his heart. Afterwards, Jianxin left with the owner of the inn, Shun Fong, and her son. After identifying the people below, he shot off into the air with mixed feelings. 10 years passed like a day. Unknowingly, many years had passed since Jianxin left Chanyang Prefecture. Back then, because of the Huayun sect, Jianxin had no choice but to conceal his identity and leave his hometown to flee the kingdom of Jessen. However, no one could have imagined that the weak youth from back then would grow to a level where he could look down on all heroes in just a few short years. He returned with the aura of a king. Jianxin flew at high speed in the air, allowing the fierce winds to blow against his face. All he could hear was the rumbling of the wind, which was deafening. Shun Fong and her son were tightly wrapped in a layer of wind elemental energy. They could only see the ground rapidly receding beneath their feet. Jianxin's expression was very complicated. His eyes were somewhat distracted, and his mind was filled with thoughts. Chanyang Prefecture. Do you still remember that there was a 4th young master called Chanyang Shoten? Chapter 435. The kingdom of Jessen's Lore City was a first-class city. There were more than a dozen such cities in the kingdom of Jessen, but they were not very famous. There were a total of 4 major powers in Lore City. They were the Chanyang Prefecture, the Tianling clan, the Chung clan, and the Yin clan. These 4 organizations were the most powerful in Lore City. They occupied the north, south, east, and west of the city respectively. The Chanyang clan had the longest history out of the 4, having existed for much longer than the other 3 organizations. It was said that when the Jessen kingdom had just been founded and Lore City had just been built, they had already been stationed there. At this moment, in the Chanyang Prefecture, where the 4 clans of Lore City resided, there was a luxurious room. There were a few pots of famous flowers in the room, giving off a faint fragrance that filled the entire room. Just a whiff of it would make one feel relaxed and happy. Inside the large room, a woman in a white dress who looked to be around 30 years old was pacing back and forth restlessly. The woman had an extraordinary temperament, graceful and luxurious. Although she was already over 30 years old, there was still a trace of her beauty that could topple countries. "Fourth sister, are you there?" Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a soft voice came in from outside. Hearing this, the woman who was pacing around in the room walked over and opened the door. She saw a beautiful woman standing outside the door. She looked like she was in her 30s. "Second sister." Seeing the beauty outside, the woman in the white dress called out softly. Then, she stepped aside and invited the second sister in. The middle-aged woman called the second sister glanced at the woman in the white dress and said, "Fourth sister, I've noticed that you've been a bit off lately. Is there something on your mind?" The fourth sister sighed softly. Her expression became very complicated. She said softly, "Second sister, I've been feeling uneasy these past few days. It's hard for me to calm down. Is something going to happen soon?" The second sister stared at the fourth sister for a while, and then she sighed lightly. "Fourth sister, are you thinking about Xiangtian again?" Hearing this, the fourth sister's expression immediately became gloomy. She lowered her head and did not say anything. Her eyes were filled with deep longing and sorrow. There was even a faint layer of hazy mist. Seeing the fourth sister like this, the second sister sighed in her heart. She calmly said, "Fourth sister, don't be too sad. Xiangtian's talent is outstanding. He'll definitely receive the blessings of the heavens. It won't be long before he comes back." Towards the end, the second sister's voice became softer and softer, clearly lacking confidence. Chanyang Shoten had left Chanyang Prefecture at the age of 15. He had wandered the outside world alone. Moreover, he had to avoid the pursuit of the Huayan sect and the search of large numbers of mercenaries. It was extremely dangerous. It had already been several years since Chanyang Shoten had left Chanyang Prefecture. During that time, Chanyang Prefecture had sent people everywhere to search for Chanyang Shoten. However, there had been no news at all. It was as if Chanyang Shoten had completely disappeared. No matter how many people the Chanyang Prefecture had sent out, there had been no news at all. Currently, everyone in Chanyang Prefecture believed that Chanyang Shoten had met with a mishap. That was because the Tianyuan continent was just too dangerous. There was slaughter everywhere. Even in cities that had garrisons to maintain order, there were many hot-tempered mercenaries who would kill each other. They would fight over the slightest disagreement. There was no reason to speak of. It was all about strength. In such an environment, the chances of a 15-year-old child surviving were extremely slim. Everyone knew this clearly. Second sister's words evoked the bitterness in Bai Yuntian's heart. More and more tears gathered in her eyes. Soon, they burst out of her eyes and flowed down her face. Bai Yuntian's body gently sobbed as she sobbed. "I don't know where Xiang is right now. Will he be able to come back?" Bai Yuntian was extremely worried about whether her son was still alive after not hearing from him for so long. The second sister pulled Bai Yuntian to the bed and sat down. She let out a long sigh and said, "Fourth sister, don't think too much about it. Aren't you and I the same? Ming Wei is just too stubborn. Just because she was dissatisfied with the engagement a year ago, she actually ran away from the Chanyang clan. Even now, we don't know where that brat is. I'm even more worried than you about her wandering outside by herself. And big sister Ling Long. She's probably much sadder than the two of us. Ahu's 4 limbs have been chopped off. In the future, even his most basic needs will be taken care of by others. He's completely a cripple who can't do anything. I really don't know if Ahu can handle such a blow. Even now, I'm still worried that Ahu won't be able to accept this reality after he wakes up, so he'll want to commit suicide." Outside Lore City, a faint, azure speck of light rapidly descended from the sky. It landed in a forest and disappeared. After a few hours of flight, Jianshun finally arrived at Lore City with Shun Fong and her son. Jianshun slowly walked out of the small forest and stared blankly at the tall city walls 5 kilometers away. His expression was extremely complicated because that was where his home was. Although it had been several years since they had parted, Lore City still maintained its original appearance. The simple walls still had traces of time that were difficult to wash away. Scattered merchants were entering and leaving the city gates. Perhaps it was because of the war, but the number of merchants entering and leaving Lore City was much lower than before. Even the guards on the city gates were made up of old and frail men. The young and strong men had long been dragged to the front lines to fight. Jianshin stared at Lore City with a complicated expression for a long time before slowly walking over with Shun Fong and Ken San. They did not speak along the way, and the atmosphere was rather gloomy. Now that the war had calmed down, Jianshin brought the two of them into the city without any obstructions. He found an inn and settled them down temporarily before leaving in a hurry. Before long, Jianshin arrived at Changyang Prefecture. The current Changyang Prefecture did not seem to have changed much compared to a few years ago. A pink wall surrounded Changyang Prefecture. A few tall trees stretched over the wall, their lush branches extending outwards as if they were peeking at the scenery outside. Jianshin arrived at the gates of Changyang Prefecture with mixed feelings. He saw that the gates of Changyang Prefecture were tightly shut. There were no guards outside at all. It was even quieter inside. Not a single sound could be heard. It was much more desolate compared to a few years ago. Jianshin immediately released the senses of his soul, enveloping Changyang Prefecture. Everything within Changyang Prefecture was imprinted in his mind. There were very few people in Changyang Prefecture now. There were less than 50 guards scattered around. Over 100 servants and maids were busy. Compared to the thousands of people a few years ago, it was much more desolate. Jianshin also discovered a familiar figure in a pagoda-shaped building in the backyard of Changyang Prefecture. It was the old man who had guarded the armory. Back then, Jianshin could not see through the old man's strength at all. Now, he could easily sense the old man's strength. He was a 4th cycle Earth Saint Master and was also the only Earth Saint Master in Changyang Prefecture. Jianshin arrived at the gates of Changyang Prefecture. He extended his hand and patted the heavy gates, producing a dull sound. Not long after, the heavy gates slowly opened. A middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance poked his head out. He looked at the door suspiciously and asked, "Kid, who are you looking for?" Although the middle-aged man did not know how to be polite, his tone was still polite. Jianshin did not say anything. He pressed his palm against the gate and exerted a little force. The heavy gates, which were only slightly ajar, immediately opened wide, revealing the courtyard of Changyang Prefecture. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The middle-aged man's expression became somewhat ugly. He shouted with a sharp gaze, attracting the attention of a pair of patrolling guards. Jianshin stood there with his head held high. He looked at the scenery of Changyang Prefecture with a complicated expression and murmured, "Do you still remember that Changyang Prefecture had a 4th young master called Changyang Shoten?" A nostalgic look appeared in Jinshin's eyes. Where did this 4th young master come from? What Changyang Shoten? "Kid, stop talking nonsense. Who are you? Tell us your name immediately." The middle-aged man shouted with a sharp gaze. At this time, a group of guards came from afar. There were a total of 10 of them, all wearing the same uniform. Except for 3 older middle-aged men, the rest were young men in their 30s. However, when the 3 older guards heard the words Changyang Shoten, their expressions changed. They looked at each other and then immediately left the group and ran over. Their eyes were fixed on Jianshin. One of them said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Have you seen the 4th young master, Changyang Shoten?" There was a hint of urgency in his tone. The 3 older guards had stayed in Changyang Prefecture for a long time and had seen Changyang Shoten before. In addition, Changyang Prefecture had sent out a large number of people to search for Changyang Shoten. The 3 of them happened to be one of those people. Therefore, the 3 older guards were very sensitive to the words Changyang Shoten. Jianshin did not speak. He glanced at the 3 guards and found that he did not know any of them. In fact, among the many guards in Changyang Prefecture, Jianshin did not know any of them. The 3 guards stared at Jianshin's resolute and handsome face. Suddenly, one of them seemed to have thought of something. His eyes flashed, and he stared at Jianshin in disbelief. He exclaimed, "You look so much like the 4th young master. You you are the fourth young master, Chanyang Shoten." Hearing this, the other two guards who had seen Chanyang Shoten were shocked. They carefully looked at Jianshin. Although Jianshin had changed a lot over the years, he still retained some of his old appearance. The more they looked, the more they felt that the young man in front of them was the fourth young master of Chanyang Prefecture, Chanyang Shoten. The middle-aged man who opened the door looked at Jianshin with a puzzled expression. He had not been in Chanyang Prefecture for long and had never heard of Chanyang Shoten's name. Jianshin felt bitter. He had left Chanyang Prefecture for too long. A few years had passed, and he thought that Chanyang Prefecture had forgotten about him. He did not expect that there would still be guards who recognized him. Chapter 436. Are you really the fourth young master? One of the guards stared at Jianshin and asked again. The other two guards also looked nervous, but their eyes were filled with anticipation. Only the guards behind them, who had never seen Jianshin before, had a puzzled look on their faces. Jianshin nodded with a complicated expression and said, "Yes, I am Chanyang Shoten. I didn't expect that after so long, there would still be people who recognized me. You really are the fourth young master. It really is the fourth young master. The fourth young master is back." The three guards who recognized Jianshin suddenly became excited. A few years ago, they were sent to find Chanyang Shoten and suffered a lot. They ran all over the world to ask for information, but there was no trace of Chanyang Shoten at all. It was as if he had evaporated from the world. "Hurry up and tell fourth madam about this." A quick-witted guard immediately ran inside. Jianshin strode over the high threshold and entered Chanyang Prefecture with complicated feelings. He walked toward his mother's room. Now that he knew Jianshin's identity, the guard who opened the door no longer dared to stop Jianshin. He then quietly came to the patrolling guards and asked in a low voice, "Brothers, when did our Chanyang Prefecture have a fourth young master? Do you know the name Chanyang Shoten?" The guards shook their heads blankly. They didn't know about the existence of Chanyang Shoten. "I think I heard from my uncle that our master has 4 children, 3 sons, and 1 daughter. Apart from the first young master, second young miss, and third young master, there's also a fourth young master. His name seems to be Chanyang Shoten, but he left Chanyang Prefecture when he was very young. There has been no news of him since then. No one knows where he went," a guard said softly. Hearing this, the guards were slightly shocked. Their gazes toward Jianshin's back changed. In the courtyard of Chanyang Prefecture, Bai Yuntian and Yu Fengyan were sitting by the bed and talking with worried expressions. There were obvious traces of tears on Bai Yuntian's face. "Fourth sister, I can understand how you feel. Don't be too sad. Xiangtian is very lucky. Furthermore, you know how smart he is. He will definitely be fine. He is most likely hiding in a secluded place." Yu Fengyan comforted gently. She had said the same thing countless times to Bai Yuntian. Over the years, whenever Bai Yuntian was sad, it would be Yu Fengyan who comforted her. She had said all sorts of comforting words countless times. She could not find anything new. "Fourth madam, fourth madam." Suddenly, a series of rapid knocks came in. The knocks on the door were very loud. There was no doubt that if the knocks were to continue, the door would be broken. The two women were startled by the sudden knocks on the door. Yu Fengyan frowned and called out, "Who's making such a ruckus? Where are your manners?" Hearing Yu Fengyan's call, the guard who knocked on the door quivered. He immediately realized how much trouble his actions would bring him. He immediately put down his hand and called out, fourth madam, good news, great news. Fourth young master is back. Fourth young master is back." Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian did not immediately react when they heard the fourth young master's words. They were clearly stunned. This was because the title fourth young master had not been used in Chanyang Prefecture for a long time. It seemed rather unfamiliar. Fourth young master, could it be? Yu Fengyan was the first to react. She was immediately shocked, and disbelief filled her face. Xiang, it's Xiang. Bai Yuntian also reacted. She immediately let out a cry of surprise and quickly ran over to open the door. At this moment, Jianshin, who was dressed in white, happened to walk into the courtyard. The moment the door opened, he saw a familiar face. His footsteps came to an abrupt halt. At this moment, his entire body seemed to be frozen. He stood there in a daze as he looked at Bai Yun Tian in a white dress. His eyes gradually became misty. Bai Yun Tian also saw Jianshan, who had just turned the corner. Although Jianshan's current appearance had changed a lot compared to a few years ago, Bai Yun Tian, who had watched Jianshan grow up, still recognized that Jianshan was her own flesh and blood at a glance. Mother and son were connected by heart and shared the same bloodline. There seemed to be a thread connecting them. The moment they saw each other, both Jianshan and Bai Yun Tian could clearly feel an indescribable feeling. The bloodline that had been separated for so many years was finally reunited at this moment. Bai Yun Tian stood at the door and stared blankly at Jianshan's somewhat familiar handsome face. Because of her excitement, her entire body trembled slightly. She could no longer control the tears in her eyes, and they gushed out like a fountain. Yu Fengyan also walked to the door and stood together with Bai Yun Tian. But when she saw Jianshan, her expression suddenly froze. She stared blankly at Jianshan, unable to believe the scene in front of her was real. When Jianshan left Changyang Prefecture, he was only 15 years old. In the eyes of the people of Changyang Prefecture, he was still an inexperienced child. Not only did such a young child have to live alone outside, but he also had to face the pursuit of the Huayan sect and the search of mercenaries. His chances of survival were practically zero. Unless he met a benefactor, no one believed that Jianshan could survive, including Yu Fengyan. Not long after Jianshan left, he mysteriously disappeared. Since then, there had been no news of him. Even when the people of Changyang Prefecture sent out a large number of people to search for him, they couldn't find the slightest clue. This confirmed the thoughts in everyone's hearts. Even if he hadn't been captured by the Huayan sect, he had definitely died in the wilderness without leaving behind a corpse. No one would believe that a 15-year-old inexperienced child would have so many methods to protect himself and hide from those experienced veterans. Although Yu Fengyan had used all sorts of reasons to comfort Bai Yun Tian, they were all just white lies. In her heart, she didn't believe that Jianshan could have survived. But now, the person who had left without any news for so many years had suddenly returned. His return was so sudden that Yu Fengyan felt that this scene was like a dream. It was somewhat unreal. Jianshan's eyes were faintly filled with tears. He slowly walked to Bai Yun Tian's side and looked at her haggard face with incomparable heartache. He softly said, "Mother, your child has returned." Jianshan's voice was somewhat sobbing. After he finished speaking, 2 lines of hot tears uncontrollably flowed from Jianshan's eyes. Bai Yun Tian suddenly hugged Jianshan and began a bawl. The emotions that had been suppressed for many years completely erupted at this moment. Xiang, my child, you finally returned. You've made your mother so bitter. Mother, I'm sorry. Your child has been unfilial. Jianshan also hugged his mother. Both mother and son wept tears of joy. The 4th young master has returned. It's actually the 4th young master who has returned. I didn't think that the 4th young master would still be alive. We all thought that the 4th young master had met with misfortune long ago. In the courtyard, more and more guards rushed over after hearing the news. Some of the guards who recognized Jianshan stood in the distance and sighed. The words that came out from their mouths let the newcomers know that there was still a 4th young master in Changyang Prefecture. Yu Fengyan finally accepted this dreamlike situation. Looking at the mother and son who had reunited, she also felt very happy in her heart. She said, "Xiang Tian, second aunt, is also very happy that you've returned safely. All right, you two should go inside and talk." Subsequently, Jianshan, Bai Yun Tian, and Yu Fengyan all entered the house at the same time. The mother and son who had been separated for several years had finally reunited. Naturally, they had a lot to talk about. In Changyang Prefecture, the news of the 4th young master's sudden return after being away for several years was spread by several guards. This matter caused an uproar in Changyang Prefecture and alarmed everyone. Even Jianshan's eldest aunt Linglong and 3rd aunt Bai Yushuang knew of this news. Although they were very surprised, the 2 of them did not visit Jianshan. Linglong was incomparably heartbroken because of what had happened to her child, Changyang Hu. She had become somewhat absent-minded and did not have the heart to care about this issue. third aunt Bai Yushuang and Jianshan did not have a good relationship to begin with. Jianshan's return not only did not make Bai Yushuang happy in the slightest, but also made her brows knit together. Jianshan stayed in his mother's room and told her everything that had happened after he left Changyang Prefecture. However, Jianshan also knew his limits and concealed many things. Some shocking news: Jianshan did not intend to tell his mother yet. Even if he did, his mother would not believe him. It was better to gradually reveal it in the future and give his family a bigger surprise. Jianshan stayed in by Yuntian's room all the way until evening and did not come out. The mother and son seemed to have endless things to talk about. At this moment, outside Changyang Prefecture, a large group of people riding various kinds of magical beast mounts suddenly appeared. Most of them were strong men with strong waists and strong backs. They exuded a murderous aura and were imposing. There were about 700 to 800 people, and they lined up neatly in a long line. The group of people stopped outside Changyang Prefecture. Then, two men immediately stepped forward and pushed open the heavy gate of Changyang Prefecture. They shouted, "Master is back. Come out and welcome him." Changyang Ba, who was riding a rank 4 magical beast mount, dismounted and tidied up his somewhat messy clothes. Then, he held his head high and strode into Changyang Prefecture. Behind him, groups of strong men also dismounted and quietly followed behind Changyang Ba. Just as Changyang Ba entered the mansion, a guard came up to him with a happy face and respectfully said, "Master, good news. Fourth young master is back." Chapter 437. Just as Changyang Ba entered the mansion, a guard came up to him with a joyful expression and said respectfully, "Master, good news. The fourth young master is back." Hearing this, Changyang Ba's expression froze for a moment. The term fourth young master had not been heard in Changyang Prefecture for many years. Now that he heard it, it felt a little strange. However, Changyang Ba quickly reacted. His eyes shone brightly as he stared sharply at the guard and exclaimed, "What did you just say?" "Master, the fourth young master is back. The fourth young master is back." The guard spoke again with a hint of excitement in his voice. Changyang Ba's expression became sluggish. His face was full of disbelief. His fourth son, Changyang Shoten, had left Changyang Prefecture for many years. During this time, there was no news at all. In Changyang Ba's heart, he had thought more than once that he would never see his fourth son, who was exceptionally talented since he was young. Because of this, he had been sad many times. Now, his fourth son, who was supposed to be dead in his heart, had actually returned. Moreover, his return was so sudden. Changyang Ba, who was not mentally prepared at all, found it hard to accept this fact in a short period of time. It was very hard to believe this fact in front of his eyes. "Is what you said true? Xiang is really back." Changyang Ba stared sharply at the guard. His voice trembled as he spoke. There was a hint of eagerness and hope in his voice. "Master, this is absolutely true. Fourth Madam and Second Madam have confirmed the fourth young master's identity." "It can't be fake," the guard said. Hearing that the fourth young master, who had left for several years, had miraculously returned, the group of guards behind Changyang Ba all revealed a look of astonishment. They all looked at each other in surprise. Many of them were senior figures in Changyang Prefecture. They all knew what had happened to the fourth young master. In their hearts, everyone thought that the fourth young master was no longer in this world. No one would have thought that the fourth young master, who had not been heard from for several years, would suddenly return. "Where's Xiang?" Changyang Ba was very excited and asked eagerly. He was very concerned about his fourth son, who had shown extraordinary talent since he was young. After all, he was his biological child. "The fourth young master is in fourth madam's room," the guard quickly replied. Changyang Ba's figure flashed and disappeared. He quickly rushed to Bai Yuntian's room. At this moment, Jianshan, his mother, and second aunt, Yu Fengyan, were still talking in the room. Almost all of the topics revolved around how Jianshan had survived in the outside world. Although Jianshan had deliberately downplayed many of the moments of life and death, the two women still felt a burst of fear and trepidation. Bai Yuntian, because she felt sorry for her son, didn't know how much tears flowed out of her eyes. Her clothes were wet and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. The two women were both experienced people and knew very well just how chaotic the outside world was. The two of them really couldn't imagine Jian-Chun wandering the outside world alone, fighting against the bloodthirsty and savage magical beasts in the magical beast mountain range. Just how much suffering and how many life and death situations had he faced. And as Jian-Chen's mother, Bai Yuntian, even felt like her heart was about to break. Bang! Suddenly, the closed door was rudely opened. Chanyang Ba appeared at the door. His complexion and excitement swept through the room. Soon, his eyes were fixed on Jian-Chen. Husband! Husband! Yu Fengyan and Bai Yuntian both stood up and spoke in succession. Chanyang Ba seemed as if he didn't hear them at all. His eyes were firmly fixed on Jian-Chen. His expression was very excited, and his eyes quickly filled with a mist. Although Jian-Chen had changed a lot, Chanyang Ba still recognized his son at a glance. Jian-Chen also looked at Chanyang Ba with a complex and excited expression. The father and son looked at each other for a while. Jian-Chen opened his mouth slightly and said softly, "Father." Chanyang Ba's body trembled violently when he heard this. He slowly walked into the room and arrived before Jian-Chen. He carefully examined Jian-Chen from head to toe before gradually revealing a smile. "Xiang you've grown up." Two streams of tears flowed from Chanyang Ba's eyes. Although Jian-Chen and Chanyang Ba hadn't seen each other for a few years, they didn't talk much. Chanyang Ba did things swiftly and decisively. He stayed in the room for a while before leaving Jian-Chen, his mother, and Yu Fengyan in the room. The war had just ended, and the guards of Chanyang Prefecture had just returned. As the head of the family, Chanyang Ba still had a lot of things to do and was very busy. With the return of hundreds of guards and some important figures of Chanyang Prefecture, the originally quiet Chanyang Prefecture suddenly became lively. Lights were lit everywhere. Many houses that had been empty for a long time were also lit. At the same time, the news of the return of the fourth young master of Chanyang Prefecture, Chanyang Shoten, quickly spread throughout the residence. Now, even the hundreds of guards and important figures of Chanyang Prefecture who had just returned knew about this matter. They were all very surprised. Jian-Chen stayed in his mother's room until late at night before leaving. Accompanied by his mother, he returned to the house where he used to live, accompanied by two servant girls. Although Jian-Chen had not returned for a long time this year, the house where he used to live still maintained its original appearance. There were servants cleaning it every day, and it was spotless. The furnishings in the room were also the same as before. "Xiang it's getting late. You should rest well," Bai Yuntian said to Jian-Chen with eyes full of affection, looking reluctant to part. Jian-Chen nodded slightly and said, "Mother, you should also go rest." Then, Bai Yuntian left Jian-Chen's room, leaving the two servant girls to serve Jian-Chen. "Fourth young master, let us servants help you change," one of the servant girls said softly. Looking at Jian-Chen's handsome and resolute face, the two servant girls' faces were slightly flushed. The two servant girls were about 18 to 20 years old. Although their appearances could not be considered to be devastatingly beautiful, they were still very beautiful. Even in a first-class city like Lore City, they were still very rare. After all, Chanyang Prefecture was one of the four great families. It was powerful and had a noble status. How could it be that just anyone could enter? Jian-Chen looked at the white room with a face full of nostalgia. Without turning his head, he said, "Both of you can leave. I want some peace and quiet. If there is nothing important, don't disturb me." "Yes." The two servant girls replied respectfully and left at the same time. There was a trace of disappointment in their eyes. Jian-Chen was not only the fourth young master of Chanyang Prefecture with a noble status, but he was also very handsome. Among these servant girls who thought that they were good-looking, who wouldn't want to have a little interaction with such a person and become a phoenix, Jian-Chen stood in the middle of the room and looked at the familiar furnishings and furniture in the room with a face full of nostalgia. He couldn't help but recall every detail of his life in Chanyang Prefecture when he was young. The scenes of the past were like a picture scroll that slowly replayed in Jinshin's mind. For a moment, Jinshin's heart was filled with emotions, and it was difficult for him to calm down. Home, this is home. This is my home. I'm home, Jinshin murmured with a stupefied expression. However, he felt a burst of bitterness in his heart. He had waited for this day for a very long time. He had looked forward to this day for a very long time. In the past, he didn't know how many times he had imagined this scene in front of him. Now that the wish in his heart had finally come true, it was very difficult for him to calm down. For himself to be able to return to Changyang Prefecture and reunite with his family, Jinshin had sacrificed too much and put in too much effort. He had walked on the edge of life and death more than once. He had even lost his life once. If it weren't for the purple and green sword spirits saving him, he wouldn't be alive in this world right now. It would be impossible for him to stand here. He had used his own blood to pave the way home. Thinking back to everything he had experienced after leaving Changyang Prefecture, Jinshin's heart was filled with a myriad of emotions that were difficult to describe. In the end, 2 crystal-clear teardrops fell from his eyes. Well, as if it had sensed Jinshin's feelings, the white tiger on his shoulder reached out its 2 front paws and hugged Jinshin's neck. Its furry little head constantly rubbed against Jinshin's face as it let out a whimper, as if it was comforting Jinshin. Jinshin slowly walked to the bed that had once accompanied him for a long time. In the end, without him knowing, he fell asleep in a daze. That night, Jinshin slept very well. He slept very soundly and peacefully. This was the first time he had slept in the years that he had left. At the same time, it was also the most comfortable sleep he had had since he was young. He didn't have to be vigilant all the time like he had been in the past. The white tiger didn't fall asleep. Instead, it lay quietly beside Jinshin. Its furry little head kept turning around, and its bright big eyes blinked as it looked around. Xiang, are you awake? The next morning, Jinshin didn't wake up from his deep sleep until his mother, Bai Yuntian, called from outside the door. He felt refreshed and energetic. At this moment, Jinshin felt that he had never felt so relaxed and happy before. Was this the feeling of returning home? Xiang, did you sleep well last night? Bai Yuntian exuded a motherly radiance. She looked at her child with a doting expression and asked with concern. Jinshin's sudden return made Bai Yuntian's mood very happy. She was full of energy, and it was obvious that she had rested well. Jinshin and his mother exchanged a few words casually before the 2 of them left at the same time. They walked towards the dining hall and prepared to eat breakfast. Walking with his mother, Bai Yuntian, on the way to the dining hall, Jinshin felt like he had returned to the scene a few years ago. Every morning, his mother would lead him to eat breakfast together. His days were very warm. When Jinshin and his mother arrived at the dining hall, his second aunt, Yu Fengyin, and third aunt, Bai Yushuang, were already eating breakfast. Beside Bai Yushuang sat a young man in luxurious robes. He seemed to be around the same age as Jinshin. He was Jinshin's third brother, Changyang Ke. After not seeing each other for a few years, Jinshin's 2 aunts hadn't changed much. However, Changyang Ke had become somewhat frail. His eyes flickered with shrewdness, and he also had a handsome appearance. Although he couldn't compare to Jinshin, he was still a dragon among men. Chapter 438. Hearing Yu Fengyin's words of praise, Bai Yuntian revealed a trace of a smile on her face. She was very fond of this son of hers. Bai Yushuang looked at Jinshin with an unsightly expression. Frowning, she said, Xiang Tian, why did you suddenly return when you were hiding outside? The Huayan sect is not something our Changyang Prefecture can provoke. You're just adding trouble to our Changyang Prefecture. Yu Fengyin and Bai Yuntian's expressions both changed. Bai Yushuang's words clearly had a great opinion of Jinshin's sudden return, as if she hoped that Jinshin would never return. His third aunt's words made Jinshin feel extremely unhappy. He felt a little angry. Just as he was about to speak, he heard his second aunt, Yu Fengyin's voice. Third sister, your words are a bit too much. Although the Huayan sect is powerful, our Changyang Prefecture is not so easy to bully. Furthermore, our clan still has Chang Bo. I'm sure you've already heard the news of Chang Bo killing several Heaven Saint Masters, at the northern fort. As long as Changbo is present, the Huayan sect won't dare to do anything to our Changyang prefecture. Xiangtian has already left his home for many years because of this matter. He suffered a lot outside. Now that he's returned safely, we should all be happy instead of treating him coldly. Bai Yushuang coldly snorted and said in a strange tone, Xiangtian has never been obedient since he was young. He likes to cause trouble everywhere. A few years ago, he even injured my Ku'er. After that, he didn't stay in Kargath Academy for long before offending the Huayan sect. Now that he's returned so suddenly, who knows what kind of power he's provoked outside. Yu Fengyin and Bai Yushuang's expressions changed once more. They had never thought that Bai Yushuang would have such a great opinion of Jianshin. Jianshin was also a little angry. His eyes flashed, and his gaze turned sharp like an unsheathed sword. Bai Yushuang didn't dare to look him in the eye. Third Aunt, I know you have a lot of opinions about me, but I hope you don't have to worry about me. As long as I cause trouble, I will naturally solve it. I will definitely not drag the family down. Jianshan said in a deep voice. You. Bai Yushuang looked at Jianshan with disdain and said, Good. Let's see what you've learned these years. I hope you can really deal with the Huayan sect on your own. Don't bring trouble to the family. I will naturally take revenge for the Huayan sect. Jianshan expressionlessly said with a serious expression. In Bai Yushuang's eyes, Jianshan's current appearance was an arrogant and condescending attitude. She immediately revealed a disdainful expression and mocked. Xiangtian, it's not that I'm scolding you, but before saying such words, why don't you think about what kind of power the Huayan sect is? Have you already forgotten what happened a few years ago? You think you can contend against the Huayan sect? Dream on. Jianshan slightly lowered his head as a cold light flickered in his eyes. Bai Yushuang's attitude made Jianshan extremely angry. However, she was still his aunt and his elder. Jianshan did not want his relationship with his family to become too strained as soon as he returned home. He greatly treasured this family that had not been easy to come by, so he remained silent. His current status was completely different from a few years ago. Not only was he a Heaven Saint Master with a limitless future, he was also the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the continent. With such a status, there was no need for him to bicker with an ordinary person. However, Jianshan had already remembered Bai Yushuang's attitude towards him. Third sister, you're not young anymore. Why do you have to make things difficult for a child? Yu Fengyin frowned, extremely angry inside. What do you mean by making things difficult? I'm just speaking the truth. Bai Yushuang glanced at Yu Fengyin, not backing down at all. Yu Fengyin was quite angry. Her chest heaved as she angrily glared at Bai Yushuang. Third sister, you dash. Second aunt, don't say any more. Jianshan interrupted Yu Fengyin before coldly staring at Bai Yushuang. His sharp gaze made Bai Yushuang feel uncomfortable as a sliver of fear appeared in her heart. In the end, she looked away. She actually did not dare to meet Jianshan's gaze. Third aunt, I respect you as my senior. I can overlook your disrespect today, but please remember everything you've said. I hope you won't regret it in the future. Jianshan emphasized every single word. Oh, look, you're actually threatening me. Bai Yushuang immediately seized the opportunity and clenched her teeth. She placed her hands on her hips and pressed on. Regret? Regret what? Chanyang Shoten, do you want to use your own methods to teach your third aunt a lesson? Look, what kind of child is this? Not only does she not respect her seniors, but she's even speaking so arrogantly. She's completely out of line. Yu Fengyin and Bai Yushuang's faces turned ashen. Anger surged in their eyes. At this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out. Haha, why is it so lively today? Everyone's so happy. Chanyang Bao walked in with a majestic gait. There was a faint smile on his face. He seemed to be in a very good mood. Chanyang Ba was a middle-aged man in his 40s. However, from his appearance, he only seemed to be in his 30s. Even though he was already middle-aged, his face still retained the handsome features of his youth. He unconsciously gave off the unique aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. Husband, father. Several people in the dining hall immediately called out. Chanyang Ba seemed to be in a very good mood today. As soon as he walked in, his gaze fell on his 4th son, Jianshin. He carefully sized him up, and the smile on his face grew wider. In his eyes, his fourth son was definitely not an ordinary person. He was destined to be a dragon among men. Even with his pleasant eyesight, he could not see through him. This made Ba feel both surprised and happy. In the end, he could not help but laugh to his heart's content. With a son like this, what more could a father ask for? After calming down, Ba sat down beside Jianshan and said, "Xiang, I've wronged you these years." This short sentence warmed Jianshan's heart. He replied, "It's not wrong at all. This child has learned a lot in these years." Good, good, good. Xiang is a real director. Ba said good 3 times. There were no other words to express the joy in his heart. Looking at Jianshan's calm and resolute face, he felt gratified. This was because he knew that his youngest son had truly grown up. Seeing Ba so concerned about Jianshan, Bai Yushuang immediately showed an unhappy expression. However, Ba's attention was focused on his fourth son, so he naturally did not notice Bai Yushuang's expression. In the blink of an eye, Ba seemed to have thought of something sad. The joy on his face disappeared, replaced by grief. He sighed and said, "It's a pity, Ahui." Hearing this, Yu Fengyin and Bai Yuntian both sighed inwardly. They felt sad for whose misfortune. Jianshan immediately thought of his big brother, who. His expression also became sad. He said, "Father, this child wants to visit big brother." Ba gently shook his head and lowered his head in silence. Jianshan could understand his father's distress. How could he not feel the same? He and his big brother, who, had a very good relationship. Now that who had encountered such a situation, Jianshan also felt very sad. "Father, this child knows about big brother's situation. Don't worry, big brother will recover. He'll be as good as new," Jianshan comforted. Ba shook his head and sighed. "That's easier said than done. Only a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master has the ability to regenerate. On the Tian Yuan continent, let's not even talk about how rare Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters are and how difficult it is to find one. Even if we do find one, we won't be able to invite them. People at that level are already beyond our reach." Jianshan also understood just how great a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master status was. They were supreme existences on par with Saint Rulers. Coupled with the fact that Radiant Saint Masters were extremely rare on the Tian Yuan continent, and it was extremely difficult to break through. It was not as easy to break through as fighters. This made Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters even more exalted. "Father, this child wants to visit big brother," Jianshan said again. "All right," Ba agreed to Jianshan's request. Without eating, they immediately hurried to whose residence. Jianshan's mother and 2 aunts followed behind them. Jianshan followed behind Ba and entered whose room very soon. Who was currently lying on the bed without moving. His eyes were lifeless as he stared blankly at the ceiling. He did not move for quite some time. 4 blood-soaked, white bandages were tied around the joints of his 4 limbs. whose mother, Ling Long, sat beside the bed in a daze. Her hair was disheveled, and her complexion was haggard. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her delicate face was covered in tears. It was obvious that she had not washed her face in several days. "Madam, I beg you, eat some food. You haven't eaten for several days already." Beside Ling Long, several maids cried out with tears in their eyes. In their hands were food that had almost turned cold, as well as toiletries.